Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Well, tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we're going to do a little something different. It's certainly going to be, hopefully, I'm going to get some call-ins. I'm not sure what I'll get to on that because I have a whole bunch of raw footage from my little vacation last week. You might have noticed, hopefully you noticed, I was dark last week because I had gone out to the family ranch land in rural South Dakota. And you can see behind me the living room for part of that with the big old pot-bellied stove that does the heating in the wintertime. Excuse me. Hi, Jeanette. How are you doing tonight? So I'm going to be showing you a bunch of raw footage from that. Problem was there was a lot of raw footage. It's all in 4K, and actually turning that into a video and rendering it took more time than I actually had to do it here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the live footage, raw footage with some voiceover by me. It's going to be pieces and parts of the raw footage. It's not going to be all of it. And I'm basically going to just let YouTube do the heavy lifting of combining all of these things into one coherent video. So we'll just let YouTube do all the fun. Before I talk about that, because I'm going to wait and see if I get a few more viewers here before I start up my little travelogue of going from Wall, South Dakota out to where this ranch land is, I'm going to mention a couple of things just politically. There has been a lot of talk lately about the fact that there are now, particularly in Portland, a bunch of federal officers going around and arresting people kind of on the sly. And it's been that has been compared to Gestapo tactics or black bagging or something like that. No, that's not actually what it is. This is what was going to happen all the time. And I'm actually glad that it went down the way that it did. The thing is, people don't like when you go around rioting, looting, committing arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocents. They kind of don't like that. It is totally different from doing an actual peaceful protest, which we always like to see. Peaceful protests are grand, but we do not like to see ones where people get killed or otherwise harmed or their property gets harmed. And people aren't going to stand for that. And what's happened is in these cities, particularly Portland, this has been going on a while, and so they're not standing for it anymore. And President Trump said he was going to send in federal troops to deal with it, and that's what he's done. These guys are not totally unmarked. They appear, from what I've seen in pictures, to be, wearing outfits that identify them as who they are. And what they're doing is they're going around, and to the people who have actually committed crimes, that they have seen commit the crimes, they wait till they're done, and they catch them afterwards and arrest them. And that's what they're doing. Now, I actually prefer this to what could have happened. What could have happened is they could have gone in with guns blazing. That's what could have happened. That was an option. It was the one that I was really afraid of. I was like, what do you do about this stuff? People are not going to sit here and just take it for long. They're eventually going to welcome federal troops coming in and, putting order back to the chaos. Well, Trump chose to do, frankly, the right thing. He is going in and quietly getting these guys rather than going in with troops and just firing willy-nilly into a crowd, which was certainly something that he could have done. So I approve, frankly, of what's been going on there. Now, some people are saying, oh, it's a violation of rights and stuff. No, that's not really what it is. They're going and arresting people that they have seen committing crimes. They're just doing it quietly. They're not going in with guns blazing. That could have happened. And if they don't quit what they're doing, it still can happen. This is an escalation. However, it's a small escalation. It is not the escalation that we could have seen. And I am perfectly in favor of the one that we saw here, this small escalation. If it actually works, great. If it gets some of the ringleaders and stuff off the streets, great. If it causes people who might be inclined to riot, destroy federal property, because they're not all peaceful protesters. Some of them are, but when we get into stuff like Portland is besieged. I mean, there's really no other way to describe it. They are completely besieged by all kinds of violence and have been for months, maybe closer to a year now. I'm not sure. So they're going in and they're trying to restore some level of order. And as Marshall says, thanks very much, Marshall, for welcoming back from South Dakota. I got some raw footage that I'm going to show. And as Marshall said, it's federal jurisdiction. They're doing things like trying to destroy federal buildings. Well, that's federal jurisdiction. And then coming up and doing something about it, that's a good thing. Again, could have gone in with guns blazing. I mean, that was certainly a possibility. It was one I was worried about. So the way that they've decided to do it is fine as far as I'm concerned. It's not black bagging. It is not Gestapo. It is them going in and stopping the violence. And I hope very much that it, induces people to stop doing it. I don't know that it will. They seem to be pretty damn crazy. But I hope that it will stop what's going on there. If it doesn't, we're still in for something that looks really, really bad. And I can't emphasize this enough. I listen to police frequencies all the time. There's a link to it in my description box. It scrolls past in my lower third, how you can do it too. And I listen to these police frequencies all the time, and every single night for about the last 50 days, 55 days, something like that, ever since it started to go to hell in Minneapolis, we've had someplace doing rioting. It's not tripping my alarms the way that it used to. What used to happen is scanner radio application on my phone would trip the alarm every single freaking night. Well, it's not doing that every night because it's getting too blasé. There are so many of them, and they're constantly going on that they're not tripping the alarms. The other day, I think it was 2 nights ago, maybe it was last night. Hell, I don't remember. It all runs together anymore. I think it was 2 days ago when they had that shooting at a Chicago church. That had to be some sort of gang-related shooting. That had to be something going on with gangs. Knowing Chicago, having lived there for 10 years or so, that had to be something going on with gangs. They were shooting at people at this funeral, and then the funeral goers were shooting back, and 14 people were injured or killed. I'm not even sure what the final tally is. Frankly, I don't pay attention anymore to what the final tally is in Chicago, because that's one very rough town. It always has been. It always will be a rough town. It doesn't matter what you do. Chicago has, I learned from living in many different places throughout my life, cities tend to have their own sort of character. And Chicago's character from the beginning has been pretty rough. When you see Al Capone and the gangs of the 1930s, well, that was an escalation of that. But it's still always been kind of a rough town. You've always heard about the south side of Chicago. It's rough. So I don't know that you can stop that. The city has its own character, and it's rough. But, clearly that's a lot of people to be killed in one night and attacked in one night. But that happens all the time in Chicago. But it tripped my alarms. For the first time in a couple of weeks now, it actually tripped my alarms in the middle of the night, and I rolled over half asleep, and I went, oh, Chicago, it's probably just some riot, and I went back. And it tripped the alarm again, and I looked at it, and I said, oh, well, okay, let's listen for a second. Oh, okay, it was this gangland head of some kind. And it was telling to me, the fact that the alarm got tripped, and I didn't even bother, and I usually will for something like that. I didn't even bother to think about it twice, because you just went, Chicago, they probably have a riot in progress, yet again. It's just become so common there. Marshall said, wouldn't it be hilarious if the Fed simply retreated, and Trump said they'd also retreat from the airport and train stations, which are also federal jurisdiction. Whoops, bye Oregon economy. Yup. Superguru 63 got home late from work. Well, that's all right. I haven't yet gotten into my footage. The footage is going to be fairly long. If you'd like to call in, I'm not sure what I'll get to in terms of call-ins. My footage of my trip out to the family ranch land is rather lengthy. As I mentioned when I first started at the top of this, I have raw footage. I have watched the footage, but it's raw, it's not edited. And the reason for that was during the time period, it's all in 4K. The original is 4K. And to get it rendered, oh God, if I was going to edit it and get it rendered, that was going to take a long time, quite possibly more than I had before the show came on. However, showing the raw footage allows YouTube to take up the backbone work of it by turning it into a semi-edited thing by virtue of it being as part of the live stream. So I've got a lot of that raw footage. Got a couple of very interesting things to show you. A couple of things that if you live in a major metro area may just surprise you a lot in terms of where it is and how it works. Now, I want to make sure if I've got relatives watching, because the last time I did something like this, I geolocated this place. I am not geolocating it. I am not showing anything that if you couldn't find this place, honestly, with a GPS. But I'm not doing anything that would allow it to be located. It is. I'm just saying it's in South Dakota. It's rural South Dakota. You mean you'll see Wall, South Dakota. So, I mean, okay, it's like you can start out from Wall and get there. But trust me, you wouldn't be able to get there. So my relatives, I'm not showing anything. I'm not showing the cabin itself. The only thing that I'm showing that is relevant to that cabin is its interior. This is the living room interior of that cabin before I did all the cleaning. It was only partly a vacation. I went out there and I cleaned because the last time someone was out there, a piece of the siding had fallen off and mice had gotten in. Now, they'd gotten rid of the mice. They'd gotten traps put in, and the mice were all gone. There were no mice when I got there. But there was a lot of cleaning to do. I did a lot of vacuuming, and the vacuum cleaner finally just up and died. So I had to go buy a new vacuum cleaner. I cleaned off every surface. Practically, used antiseptic and sprayed it down. Every surface in the place was cleaned off. All of the food that had been well out of code date or that was open such that it might have been touched by mice went. I completely did all of the laundry. You can't see it here. There's a couple of beds and bedrooms here. There's a lot of bedding that's in there, and I took all of that stuff into Rapid City, and I did 10 loads of laundry. 10 freaking loads of laundry to clear out everything. So I washed everything in there, cleared it out really good, cleaned it up really good. You can't necessarily see it here because it wouldn't be, obviously clean. But I did a lot of work out there. One thing I did notice, however, there is also off screen that you can't see here, is a rocker recliner. And I discovered that rocker recliners do extraordinary things to my lower back because I suffer from lower back arthritis. Wow. I could do around and do all this work, my back killing me, lay down in that thing for an hour. Oh, everything's fine. The moment I got home, I went to the thrift store and I bought myself a recliner. Paid $60 for a used recliner, and it has been really useful. Frankly, it's about as good as my chiropractor had been. I hate to tell them this, but they may be seeing me a little bit less because I've got this. So it's really good, and if it can stave off any time I've got problems with my sciatic nerve, which is really nasty when that happens, hey, best $60 I will have ever done. But I put a bunch of money in this when I was there. Looking back here, Marcia says, wrong footage. Come on, Bill, at least brown it in a toaster oven or something before serving it up. I'll be doing a running commentary as I do it, rather than have you hear the air conditioning and bumping around. There is some jerkiness of the camera that's unavoidable, especially when you get out into the more rural parts of it. But you'll see. But it's raw footage, and as much as I've not edited it, I'm just going to run it. Drop of Truth says, hey, Bill, hey, gang, howdy from the political inanity of Australia at the moment. Hey, welcome to the world. They're having it both. They're having it all over the UK. They're having it here in the US. It's going on in Australia and lots of other places. I got to tell you, man, the organization, not the people who are just, doing the peaceful protesting, but the organization, Black Lives Matters, is a leftist communist organization with explicit goals of destroying the United States and other countries. That's what the organization is. So if you're somebody who's going out to Black Lives Matters, protests, just keep in mind that organization. Okay, I don't mind you protesting as long as it's peaceful. I don't mind. But keep in mind that if you're going to associate yourself with that organization, look at their website and see what they say they are. They're a leftist, Marxist, communist organization working for the overthrow of the United States. It is just that simple. They're evil. They're downright evil. So again, if you're going to be doing Black Lives Matter protests, just remember in whose name you're actually doing it. That's a horrible place. Let's see. Jeanette says, be glad you didn't do the laundry by hand. Oh, my God, that would have been... No. I drove this stuff into Rapid City on day 3. 10 loads of laundry. 10 loads. Everything from sheets to comforters to everything. The only stuff that I didn't wash were the curtains. You can't see them here, and I'm not going to show them to you. Curtains are old enough that if I wash them, there's some good chance they would have fallen apart. But they did get a good vacuuming when I came back with the replacement vacuum cleaner, because there was so much cleaning to do that the vacuum, just the original one, was there just up and choked and died. It was a good time. I had a couple of 3 days where I didn't have anything that I had to do. I could have gone out and done the lawn, but I figured, I've done enough here. Let the next guy who comes up, and my uncle is probably going up this weekend, and let him do the lawn. I did enough. It was enough so that we have a neighbor who actually ranches the land and keeps some cattle that has my grandmother's brand on it, which, by the way, is that stylized SYL that you see here. That's the brand that's on my family's cattle. He grazes them and ranches them for us, and as a result, there's some financial stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we don't make any profit off of it, but at the same time, we're paying some stuff so that he is, getting remunerated for what he's doing for us. Let's see. There's that jackalope. Yes, a jackalope is always in every single one of my jackalope, and a towel are always in every single one of my chroma keys, whether they're actually there or not. They're also in. There's also a jackalope in every one of my thumbnail pictures. So it's a joke. It's a joke. I should probably tell from time to time. When I was teaching, for some reason, my students nicknamed me the Jackalope of Truth. And so I've just kind of stuck with that. It's not quite a logo for the show, but it's something that always appears. You can't see it, but it's actually part of the lower third here. What happens is YouTube is overlaying my avatar image, which is the same thing. But if you were to look at this footage, just raw, you would also see it in exactly the same place. Excuse me. Superguru 63. I've always noticed that people that cry racism in the loudest are usually the biggest racists. Hey, you know what? I figured out something today. I figured out that I am an oppressed minority. You see, I have type 2 diabetes. People are always saying, oh, you have white privilege because you don't have to factor in your whiteness in your daily life, like black people have to factor in their race in their daily life. And I don't know. I don't know what it's like to be black. Maybe that's a problem. I don't know. What I do know is I have type 2 diabetes, and this actually is something that I have to factor into my daily life. I have to take medications for it. I have to keep on a very, very strict diet. I have an extremely strict diet that I kick out almost all of the carbohydrates and sugars from my diet. I eat a lot of meat, a lot of cheese, a lot of sugar-free things that don't have carbs in them, because a lot of times if you have sugar-free food, you look at the carbohydrates, they're really high. Well, that doesn't do anything for you either. If you're diabetic, that's still a problem. So every time, every day, am having to take into account the fact that I have diabetes. Now, that combined with a severe anxiety disorder, which I'm getting great meds for, and I'm staying on them. But between those two things, I can't work. What happens is if I get under any level of stress at any job, my diabetes, my blood sugar levels go up and down and up and down and up and down. And I had really badly, like they'll go from 40, which is, life-threatening, all the way up to 400, which is life-threatening if you look at blood sugar levels, and then back down and back up. I had a come to Jesus moment when I had passed out on my living room floor, woke up, checked my blood sugar, and it was 40. That's like, okay, quick, I got to go eat something with sugar in it, because that is really dangerous levels of blood sugar. You can die, go into diabetic shock with that. So I immediately went and did something, but it was at that point that I realized, geez, I can't, work anymore. So being diabetic is something that I have to live with every single day. I have to, take it into account. So those of you who do not have diabetes, you are, in fact, non-diabetic privileged. So if I have this, if I am someone who has to take this into account, I want you to remember, check your non-diabetic privilege when you see me going out and looting and rioting and committing arson and a robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and murdering innocents. Because, hey, you got the privilege. It's okay if I do that stuff. I am, in fact, an oppressed minority. Going over to my back to my people who are commenting. Drop Truth says, since the advent of this crown disease, thank you, something, because I can't say the name, otherwise it's a problem. Nonsense, in February, we had 119 people die in a population of 24 plus million. I feel more threatened by government incompetency. Oh, you want a good one, man. You want a good one. On the way back from this, right? I stopped in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Now, Sioux Falls with a metro area, it's not a big city, but it's got a metro area of about 266,000 people. And I stopped at this Walgreens because a while back I was smoking a pipe, and I stopped that. But I still am using these nicotine lozenges, and I was running out. So I stopped at this Walgreens that I've been to Sioux Falls a million times. And I stopped at this Walgreens. It's not far off of the interstate. And what were they doing? Oh, they had on-site COVID testing. In fact, it was drive-through COVID testing. Oops, I said the name of that virus. Well, they had drive-through testing on that virus that's going around. And the testing facility consisted of one guy in a straw hat sitting on a lawn chair underneath a hastily erected awning, and he was braving 100-plus degree temperatures Fahrenheit. That's really fracking hot if you're on Celsius. That's really hot. That's their testing facility. There is nothing sanitary about that. They're going to get false positives. They're going to miss somebody that has them. But regardless, people who are testing positive for that are going to wind up in South Dakota numbers for that virus that's going around. I mean, they talk about how these things are overblown. Well, there's a perfect example. I wish I'd gotten a picture of it. I wish I did. It didn't occur to me. I wish that I'd gone and got a picture of it because it was so utterly ridiculous. I'm like, I'm sorry, you're doing testing that way? That's ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. It's just so stupid. Yeah, 3 more died in the weekend, all over 90. Yes. Oh, and that's another thing. My age, barely. I don't worry about it because in my state, I don't think it's anything I have to worry about. But my age gives me a slighter, more higher chance of getting the virus. The fact that I'm diabetic supposedly makes it more likely. But hell, in our city of 360K-ish, I don't remember. I stopped paying attention when I calculated it out, and it was less than 1% of the population who was getting COVID, most of whom were elderly, and significantly less than 1% of the population who died from it. And I'm sorry, I'm just not going to care. It's ridiculous. Oh, and we now do, in fact, have a state-ordered mandate for masks in some places. Like at the convenience store that's down the street, I have to wear a mask there, but I don't have to wear a mask if I go to the local hamburger joint. You figure it out. I can't. Funny one, man. I thought I had to go to the dentist today, so I went into the dentist's office. They have you stop in the parking lot, phone them from your car that you are checking in, and then they'll send somebody out in a mask to take your information, blah, 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 blah. Now, I didn't get into it. It turns out I was wrong. The appointment is tomorrow. But what's the point? You're going to get in there. They're going to be doing work on your teeth. You're not going to be wearing a mask for that. It's ridiculous. And just to be passive aggressive about it, I thought, all right, Governor, if you're going to do this crap, I ordered me a mask. It's just a Halloween mask. I'd like to show it to you. Probably next week I will. It should be getting here by then. But it's a steampunk, gas mask with a pair of big pipes that goes from one part of the mouth onto the back and another big pipe that goes from the mouth all the way up to the top. I'm going to wear that sucker in public because I'm sorry. If you're going to do that in a state where, I'm sorry, there just aren't that many cases, then I'm going to be passive aggressive and push back with that. By the way, if you're somebody, I was told by a doctor that if you say to someone, if you come in someplace and say, no, I have a medical exemption, I don't have to wear a mask, according to HIPAA rules, which is what governs what doctors can say about patients, you don't have to tell them. You don't have to show them any proof. You just say, no, I have a medical exemption. No, I don't have to tell you because of the HIPAA law. Just something to throw out there. Of course, you should never do that unless you do actually have some kind of medical exemption. Jeanette says, in the 4 counties around me, there's been 1 death. 1. And I am tired of people being afraid. Yes, this whole thing really is something that was created by the press. And nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. This was, I think, a way to attempt to make Donald Trump look bad, as always. They want to say, oh, it's all his fault that everybody has this virus. I don't know what else you would have done as a president, really. He cut off travel from China, cut off travel from several other countries, and at the same time, Nancy Pelosi was telling him that, oh, that's racist, trying to cut off the Chinese. It was only later that they said, oh, he should have cut him off earlier. And at the same time, like I say, when he did it, she was whining. And I think the whole thing, honestly, is an attempt to make Trump look bad. Because without some major thing making him look bad, he's going to win against the guy who's senile, which is what Biden is. Biden is a senile old coot. SuperCruise63 says, a drop of truth, here in the States, you can die falling 30 stories. And if you have tested positive for China virus, that's why they file you as a death. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I had a cousin of mine not the week I went to her memorial service the Saturday before I went back out to the cabin. That's why I went to the cabin, because it was in South Dakota, it was in Rapid City, and I thought, well, perfect time to spend a week out there. They did a COVID test on her. She didn't die from that. She died from natural causes of another type. Yeah, if she'd tested positive, that's what they would have listed her death as, despite the fact that if she had tested positive, it had nothing to do with her death. It was a natural causes thing. Marshall says, I see a type 2 and I raise you an incurable immune system disorder. Well, there you go, Marshall. You are also an oppressed minority. Everybody else needs to check their incurable immune system disorder privilege. You're a minority. Please feel free to go out and commit all sorts of violence because you are an oppressed minority. Jeanette, you only have 1 working kidney. Well, there you are. You're an oppressed minority. You have something that other people don't have to take into account in their daily lives. Just like I have white privilege because I don't have to take my skin color into account. Other people don't have to take that into account. You have 1 working kidney. Everybody else has 1 working kidney privilege. They need to check their privilege when deciding whether it's okay for you or not to go out and burn stuff down. SuperCruise63 says, therefore, you cannot believe the death numbers given by anyone. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, I'm sitting there looking at that thing over in Sioux Falls, and I'm like, this is nothing sanitary about this. They're out in 100-degree heat. Hell, I mean, the guy's going to put on gloves, but I don't know how the testing chemicals react to being 100 degrees or more, because that's what it was. This is the time of year. My father always used to joke that when he retired, and it didn't work out that way, but when he retired, he was going to get a place that was nice and temperate, but keep his home in Lincoln, Nebraska, so that he could come back for 1 week in August and 1 week in January just to remember what he had left behind. because it gets really, really cold in January, and there's usually a foot of snow, and it gets really, really hot in the summertime, 100 degrees or more. And around here, unlike where I went for the weekend, there's so much humidity here. Oh, the humidity's terrible. You wouldn't think so in Nebraska, but the people who settled here, it's a natural prairie, so the people who settled in the cities and stuff, well, they put up trees. They put up lots and lots and lots of trees. I mean, you'll see trees in every single yard, but they're not trees that grew there naturally. Those are trees that grew when people planted them the first time they showed up. Let's see. Wow, we got... drop a tooth. Neither does Stevie Wonder. Did you see his latest pro-BLM rant? Embarrassing. I have not. I pay almost no attention. You get cranky. Yeah, Jeanette, yes. Medical intersectionality. That's what we've got. We can call it medical intersectionality. That's a perfect name for it. Drop a tooth says, if you get hit and killed by an ambulance carrying someone who's got this thing, a patient, then did you die from CV2? Yeah. They probably counted as such, yes. Why can't I say the name of this virus? Because when you're someone with my politics, you are already at a disadvantage. They will push you down in the ratings. They won't show you on sidebars or in suggested videos. And hell, they don't even usually put my videos up to my subscribers. I got 300 and some subscribers. Right now, I have or had 8 concurrent viewers. They don't even put that stuff up. I'm not even sure that you can reliably, I certainly say to everybody, hit the notification bell. That may be the only way that you're reliably notified. But I'm not even sure that my subscribers are reliably notified via that. And with my politics, and this is true with anybody who's got my politics, libertarian, conservative, that sort of thing, if you mention it, their algorithms watch for it, and they will push you down even further in the ranks. So I can't mention it. Yes, Supercruise63, it's a very bad word on YouTube. YouTube is a very leftist company. Yes, it absolutely is. Marcia says, the testing facility gave me great solace about the voting facilities. Yes, not to mention the fact that the skill of counting seems to be going out of style. Yes, well, when your educational system doesn't actually educate, yes, counting becomes a problem. That whole thing with the Democratic primary in Iowa, I lived in Iowa for a long time, made everybody in Iowa look bad, because that was horrifying. It was stupid and horrifying. Its whole purpose was to make sure that Bernie, whom everyone I knew in Iowa was planning to vote for, didn't get the media push that you get by being, getting Iowa first in the nation. Because that has never happened before. It's never happened since. It had to have been intentional. It had to have been, because they've been successfully able to do those things. I have never, in living in Iowa, in living in Nebraska that borders it, in living in Illinois that borders it, in 55 years, I have never seen them screw that up like that. That was an amazing mess. And don't think ill of the people in Iowa. Think ill of the people in the Democratic Party in Iowa who engineered that crap. Jeanette says, can't keep up with what they have canceled. Yeah, absolutely. You can't anymore. Exposure to South Dakota 20 makes one forget whole days sometimes. Yeah, I could have spent 3 weeks out there. I would have liked to have been, but for a number of reasons I couldn't. I did spend about a week and a half, however. Superguru63 says, Marshall, yeah, here in California they use voter harvesting, yes. And Joseph Stalin said it's not the people who vote that count, it's the people who count the votes. Absolutely. Let me see. Drop truth. Did you shoot the guns to reduce your angst during my country visit? I took some firearms with me. I did not really shoot them or get a chance to take video of them shooting, because I really spent most of my time doing a lot of cleaning, a lot of laundry, and basically just trying to relax and have a good time. So I didn't really go out and do much. Drop says in Brazil they have this quote when it comes to elections. I don't know what that says. What thief do you want? Yes, here it's which power mad sociopathic narcissist do you want to vote for? And I always say to people that's a true statement about national federal politicians. They're power mad sociopathic narcissists. Look up antisocial personality disorder, which is what sociopathy is. Look it up the great place to look it up is Wikipedia. Go down, look at the symptoms, and you're going to see that a lot of them apply. If you look up narcissistic personality disorder, you're going to see a lot of them apply. And they're absolutely power mad, or else they wouldn't even try. They're power mad sociopathic narcissists. And it filters down to the state and even local level. Cerebral Cruise 63 says if you were still a smoker, you would be one of the most oppressed minorities out there, not to mention being a single white male. Yeah, you're from California, as I recall. I was out there turn of the century. Man, their smoking laws were draconian then. I can't imagine what they are now. Yeah, Jeanette, it's a wonder we're not all crying for reparations. Yes, I want reparations for being diabetic. I want reparations. Check your non-diabetic privilege. I want reparations. Help you're being oppressed. Monty Python and Holy Grail. King Arthur's response. Bloody peasants. Yes. The peasants are revolting. Well, of course they're revolting. Why look at them? They're revolting. The Super Cruise 63 says not to mention they're outlawing vape shops, but promoting pot dispensaries. Why? Especially when all the deaths associated with vaping were THC vapes only. I didn't know that. Drop Truth says to Jeanette, only leftists and idiots, much the same thing. Think the world owes them a living. Yes, the world owes you nothing. I'm sorry, that's the truth. Just because you happen to be born, the world does not owe you anything. It's what you make of it that counts. Let's see. Jeanette says Super Cruise 63 hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah. Also, Drop of Truth. It says, I know I was trying for sarcasm. Oh, well, everything sarcastic. Trust me when I talk about it sarcastic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and throw up some of the raw footage. I'm going to talk about it as it goes through here, and you may certainly feel free to make any comments that you want in chat, and I will answer them as we go through. So, the first place that I started was Wall, South Dakota. If you've ever heard of Wall, South Dakota, it is a giant tourist trap. This is Wall. It's Wall Drug itself. It's essentially kind of a mall. You can see lots and lots of cars. Wall Drug made their living, and I'll try to get this before the footage ends. This is the Wall Drug itself. It's essentially one big long, block of mall. And then across the street from that is, the same thing. It's just a lot of different, tourist trap stuff. Wall's just a tourist trap. Stopping there is fun if you've never been there. Just be aware that if you want to buy stuff there, they're charging you tourist trap prices. This, of course, is the vehicle that I took out, my 2012 Jeep Wrangler Sport, which I have named Bessie. That is in honor of the doctors. Sorry, my footage just ends on a dime. There's no fading out on this. I'm trying to catch it before it does. Anyway, this is Bessie, my Jeep, and this is on the way out of town by Wall. We're just passing my favorite motel there, which is now up for sale. If I had the money, I'd seriously think about buying it. It's a very nice little motel. But this is actually the town of Wall. You get away from Wall Drug, and it's just like any other small town. You get houses and stuff, and there's not much to see. Let's see. That's the same color as your company primary logo. Hey, yes, Doctor Who Bessie. That's why I do it. Nice Jeep. No gun rack. No, if I need to put my guns in, I just throw the guns in the back. It's a small thing. Internally, it's fairly small. So you'd be surprised how much you can fit in it, but it's still a small vehicle internally, so only so much you can do. This, unfortunately, is going to be some bouncing around because this is not a straight road. Amazingly, though, I'll talk about it when I get to the gravel roads. But amazingly, this is still better than any of the roads in Lincoln, Nebraska. They have not had any significant road maintenance for at least 20 years. I came back here to live after not living here for a better part of 20 years, maybe more, to discover the roads are terrible. It's like off-roading in Lincoln, Nebraska. They're all bad. They need to be ripped up right down to the ground, and they're not doing that. There's no way to do that. So this is just headed out a Wall. You can see the moment I get out there, there's a little bit of the Badlands of South Dakota. That's what sometimes shows up in the back of my chroma key image, the one that I use for when it's just a generic one. It looks like the inside of a cabin. But off to the right there, you can see just a little bit of the Badlands. It's actually more impressive when you get into the Badlands itself. It's very flat. Yes. The entirety of South Dakota. One thing you may not have caught there as that car was going by. It is something that you always do. It is just a tradition. Whenever you see a car coming out in this part of the world, you wave to them, and they wave back. It's like you're waving to a neighbor. That always happens. You didn't catch it there because it probably went too fast, but I waved back to him. You will always, you don't see me doing it, but you always wave. That's just what happens. And yes, it's extremely flat. The entire state of South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, most of Iowa, very, very, very flat. You will just see nothing but road going on. This is a little farther down the road. Have installed lift kits on many of them. I don't have. This is a stock Jeep. Nice quality roads, asphalt. Haven't been into the interior of Australia. Yeah, the roads here are pretty good. They haven't been touched very much in a long time. But to be honest, you don't get a ton of traffic on it. You can see. Now I did this one because this is where the road ends. And we get straight into the gravel roads. And for the next number of miles, it's just going to be gravel roads that you see. Interesting thing about driving through this, you'll notice them all over the road. That's because when you're going out here, this car in particular does not corner well. It's not built for that. It's built for off-roading. And so what you do on roads like this is you lean over into the area with the corner because the corner is angled down. Doesn't matter which direction you're driving, you always angle with the corner because the corner part is angled down. It helps your car stay on the road, especially if you're at higher speeds. You'll see it later on in one of the videos, but there was a guy who was behind me who was in a FedEx truck. And now I'm doing on these roads at tops 50 miles an hour because this car just does not corner well. But the guy who was in that FedEx truck, good God, he was screaming through there at speeds that would just make me scared as hell. I mean, you can do it in certain types of cars, but not this one. It just doesn't corner well. Going back a little bit to my stuff here. True God's country, no offense intended. I take no offense. Lots of people out there would say the exact same thing. It's why they live out there. Flatten the curve. Yes, Jeanette, flatten the curve. Speed on gravel. Well, again, if it was another car, if it was a pickup, if it was something that's a little longer, that could take these corners a little better, I would have been, going faster. There's points at this where I do go somewhat faster, but this car just isn't built for it. It's too short, and it just doesn't corner very well. But again, out here, you always, it doesn't matter which side of the road you're on, you always head for the side that's got the curve on it. The only time you don't do that is if you have actually oncoming traffic from the other direction. Then you each keep to the side of the road. But you'll see I'm also in the center of the road quite a lot. That's just normal out there on those, and it becomes more important as you get closer and closer to where the ranch land is. But the speed limit here is actually, there's no enforced speed limit. There's nobody out there to enforce it. There are no cops out here that you'll ever see. The only time you see anybody from law enforcement is during deer season. I got a crazy relative whose property adjoins ours. He, just to be an a-hole one time, he called in and said that we were hunting deer without licenses, and so at the regular part of the road there was a parks something, I've forgotten who handles that, waiting to check and see if we had any tags. That's the only time I've ever seen anything like law enforcement out there. You don't get it. You take care of yourself out there. There's no potholes. Yes, in fact, there's less potholes than many Brazilian city streets. This is actually going, it's jumping a bit because I'm going over gravel and things, but this is actually smoother than driving in Lincoln, Nebraska. It actually is. I was rather surprised. Lincoln's roads are terrible. They've not done any significant road maintenance in at least 2 decades. This is better, flatter driving. And they were out grading it while I was there. The county grades this road, lays down new gravel because it gets kicked off as people drive through it. The winter, when they plow, it gets plowed away. They do plow this gravel road. They don't plow some of the road, much of the road that's going to get towards the end of some of this footage. But they do plow the gravel roads. Do I get planes checking your speed? No. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. There's nobody out there to care. You get in trouble, you find the nearest neighbor. That's one of the things about that. Neighbors always help out. They will always help out. It's just, aside from that one crazy guy who's in our family, some kind of second or third cousin. I won't mention his name, but he's just crazy. He's in the right place. I think he would be diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic in real life. He's in the right place. He's where he should be because there's nobody out there to hurt. He's just crazy as hell. Now, here's one. Let me just check real quick. Would be fun for me as a dirt circle. Lots of kids scream up and down these roads. Now, the reason I stopped here, there's nowhere near the ranch, but what you can see over the fence there, and you'll see me as I jerk around here with my camera. I picked up the camera. The camera is just sitting in front of the dash on this car. Unfortunately, I couldn't do anything to lock it down, which is kind of funny when one of the other videos. What you can see here is what is a former nuclear missile silo. There are two of them on the way to this property. You can't see it very well in this one because the rancher has got it locked up, and I didn't want to go through there. But that area where the hay is stored is a former nuclear missile silo. In the Cold War, there would have been nuclear missiles there. At least one. The reason that they've got the hay in there is because the fence, and we'll see it better in the other nuclear missile silo. And I walked out here just to show you. There is a ton of grasshoppers out here. I was lucky that grasshoppers didn't splatter in front of part of the car that I was using to put my camera in. But the thing about this, and I'll talk about it a little bit more when you get to the other one because I was able to get much closer. But the fencing will run for the rest of its natural life. The fencing out there will run for the natural. It has never been touched since they took them out in the late 1990s, cemented them over. It's a great place to put hay because the cattle will never, ever get through that fencing. Marshall says you may want to move your company and yourself out there, grab a few hundred acres, and 3D print my own facilities. Hey, it's where I would very much like to retire. Someday, I hope to retire out there. I call those dinky little things silos. Wait till we get to the other one. It was too far away to see it, but wait until we get to the other one where I could see. Are there any hay bales? Yes, there were hay bales inside of that former missile silo. And they put them in there. They stored them there, again, because the cattle will never get through the fences. Sometimes you get cattle with regular barbed wire, and you'll see the fences later on in the video. Sometimes you get cattle with barbed wire that will go straight through the wire. They'll just call them crawly cows. They'll crawl through the barbed wire. But out there, they'll never, ever, ever, ever get through the fencing that was around those missile silos. The silos are underground. That's true. When I was young and going out there frequently, and my grandparents were still ranching out there, yeah, and they're heavily guarded. If you got too close to the fence line, they would come out if you stayed there very long. But yeah, the silos are underground. What they did was they took out the missiles and then they cemented over the silos. So there's this big cement slab, and that's why the ranchers put all of their hay bales in there, because this big cement slab surrounded by fencing that is very high with barbed wire at the top, very well done fencing, and and it hasn't been touched since. They've never had to do any kind of maintenance on them. It hasn't been touched since the Cold War. It's a great place. See me going over right now? That was a grill in the ground, in the road, and that's there because it's where a fence line crosses the road. So they don't really put the fences in these roads, in these county roads. So what they do is they put a grating across that the cattle can't get through, and they know they can't get through. They all look at it, and cattle are just smart enough to go, I can't step on that. So it acts as a way to keep the fencing and across the road. Let's see. Use fly mesh screens over your radiators when going bush. Yeah, wash it off every few hours. Silos were targets for the nuclear missiles. Absolutely. Yeah, had there been a nuclear war, this part of the country would have been turned into a radioactive wasteland. In fact, there is a control station for nuclear missile silos not too far from there. You can go to it now. It's a monument. You can go and take tours there. My father, however, when he was in his teens, well, he used to go there. Now you can see we're going down, just as a thing, we're going down into a valley. the ranchland is itself in a valley, and you'll be able to see some of that as we go along. But my father, when he was in his teens, he would go to that place that was a nuclear missile silo control center, and the airmen would show him around. It was totally against orders. If they had ever been found out, they'd have just been court-martialed instantly and sent off to Fort Leavenworth. But they were so bored. I mean, they'd go to these control centers and just be bored. So they get some kid that comes out, from the sticks, and they'd say, hey, sure, yeah, you want to look around? No problem. I don't remember quite why I took this necessarily footage, aside from the fact that, okay, we're getting out of what's completely flat and into what was. This has been carved out by the retreat of the last glaciers. This was once the bottom of a very wide river that has now become a much smaller river. You'll see it. I'm not going to mention what river it is out of respect for my relatives who don't want this geolocated. But we'll see the river that's there now, but this entire area, as the glaciers were retreating, used to be completely underwater. How do the farmers get through the fencing? Well, it's ranchers out here. It's all cattle. I'm not sure if I got any here, but it's all cattle, and you'll see how we get through the fencing. It's actually fairly simple. Is that where Zephram Cochrane will launch from in the future? No, he's in Montana, but they had plenty of nuclear missile silos there as well. Buy a big silo, then sink a third of it underground for a natural cool room. Out here, a good thing to get, and I happen to know what Marshall's talked about this, is what's called a monolithic dome. Monolithic dome. Look it up. It's very interesting. Sorry, again, this footage just cuts. There's no fade out on it. I'm sorry about that. It's kind of jarring. But you can see here they've got a lot of people who are doing things with. Here's where we're going to see the second nuclear missile silo. This one I could get right up to, fortunately, and so you'll be able to see it a little better. This is a road that they would have taken back, during the Cold War to inspect the nuclear missile silo. But what we're coming up on is a silo, and as you can see, they have some hay in there, hay bales, because again, cattle will never in a million years get through this. And you can see it's a chain link fence. It was never electrified, but chain link fence topped with that barbed wire that's pointed outwards, angled outwards, so that nobody could crawl over the top. It's just like prison wire and a prison gate. There's no way. Now this you can't see it because so they put some dirt over the top of it over the years, but right there would have been where the silo is. That's where the underground silo was. And again, had there been a nuclear war, these were targeted. This whole area would have turned into a nuclear wasteland if that had ever happened. But as you can see, cattle will never get through this. It's too well built. Nobody has touched this since the Cold War. It's a good place for these people to put things like hay bales, because cattle will never get through it. Let's see. It's hilly. Yeah, here we get into some hills, and we're going to get into a big one later that's kind of interesting. Yeah, they already go down 100 feet, over 30 meters. Yeah, exactly. Again, when they got rid of them, what they did was they cemented over the holes that they were in, and then they and again, saw one of those grill things that we went past in order to get over. Dropper 2 says, monolithic domes are quick and easy to make. Do they have an inflatable and removable infrastructure when building them in the U.S.? Yes, they use shotcrete, and they're inflatable, and they're very good with things like tornadoes. This area is still part of Tornado Alley. I don't remember the last time there would have been a tornado here. It's kind of up on the edge. But, oh, God, believe it or not, because South Dakota turns into a giant tourist trap when you get to Wall, because just past that is the Black Hills, which is where, things like the Mount Rushmore is. The entire Black Hills is nothing but a giant tourist trap. Well, they have services where you can sign away your life, and they will take you out to spectate tornadoes. Don't do that. Do not spectate tornadoes. But they sometimes will live stream them on YouTube, and I just look at them and facepalm. Don't spectate tornadoes. It's a bad idea. Drop says you were referring to the grain silos, not missile silos. Yeah, they don't have a lot of grain silos out here because it's a natural prairie. They have to buy the grain. There are some silos you'll see from time to time, but they have to buy the grain. Most grains don't grow out there. Alfalfa and hay is about it. It is a natural prairie, and it simply won't grow very many crops. There are some years where they get a lot of rain. This is not particularly one of them, where they can grow corn, but those are very few and far between. Sometimes it goes the year without a drop of rain coming down. Didn't have that problem this year, but there still wasn't a lot. Up in front, you can see right now on this one, there is a big dust being kicked up by one of the neighbors. He's driving his pickup and kicking up some dust. You can't see behind me. I'm also kicking up a dust cloud. This guy is, part of the reason that I got this video is this particular neighbor is about to turn off exactly the opposite direction from where my grandparents' ranch was when they were ranching, and I'll point that out. Tornado tourism, Dropper 2 says, sounds like a recipe for disaster. Yes, I'm sure that they have to sign away their lives, literally sign away their lives, saying, I will not hold this stupid touring company responsible if I get killed. And I don't know, the people I've seen on them are young people who do the drives, too stupid to know that they're actually very... Okay, this guy's going to turn off on the right. You can see with that little barred area over that, on the left. That's where my grandparents' ranch used to be. It was off to the left. This is land that used to be on their ranch. Yeah, when sirens go off, all Nebraskans go to the porch and spectate. God, no. No, we go to other supposedly tornado-proof shelters. To be honest, though, I've never seen one that I thought was tornado-proof in real life. Because I was around when a big cluster of tornadoes tore through Omaha, Nebraska, which is a city of about 1 million, was less than that at the time. But they're totally destructive. You do not spectate them. Although one time when my father was working for the State Mental Hospital in Nebraska, they do tornado drills from time to time, so that everybody knows, especially out at mental institutions, you have to do these tornado drills. So they did a tornado drill, and everything was fine. And then they had an actual tornado sounded, so everybody went and did the thing. My dad was head of a unit out there, and so they were looking, and they couldn't find this one guy. Well, he was some idiot, not a patient, who had gone up to the roof to spectate the tornado. Don't ever spectate a tornado. It's a bad idea. Very, very bad. When do you get to the Black Hills? You don't here. They're in the opposite direction from me. If you go west of Wall, rather, that's when you get to the Black Hills. And the Black Hills is just a giant tourist trap. The entire place is a tourist trap. Root cellars, yeah, you can go there. We don't have much of those. Doris Day, Calamity Jane song, yeah. We passed it a little bit off to the left. You can see the river that's left there now. That's left from the... it was off to the left. You can see it's the river that was off to the left. Now here I had unfortunately accidentally turned on the zoom, so you can't see some of the stuff. It's going to go away fortunately when I get done with this. There's the guy who was in the car for the truck for UPS, who had been screaming behind me. He got in front of me when I went off to the second nuclear missile silo, and man, oh man, was he going fast. I suppose he has to. He's got some kind of thing he has to keep. But they get deliveries out there from UPS and Amazon, just like every place else. They have phones, they have cell phones, they have internet access. It's normal sort of 20th century stuff out there. It's just that they happen to live way out. One thing you will notice is we've gone from a sort of two-lane gravel road to a single-lane road. Now, I'm climbing right now. I can't see it, unfortunately, because I had the freaking zoom on by mistake. And it's jerking around, too, because of that. It'll be much better when I get to the top of this hill, you'll see. And I figure out that I've got the zoom on, and I turn it off. But it's headed up a hill with a pretty high grade, and this is the only access into the property from here. So, you wondered how we get through the fences? Well, you're about to find out. You open them up, you go through, and then you close them back up again. Let's see, 171K for 156 acres. Out here, so you can see me, I just opened up the gate, and I'm going to drive through it, and then I'll close it up again. Out here, right now, if I understand correctly, land is going for $500 to $700 an acre. I have a viable aquifers in this area. Yes, we're sitting on top of the North Platte Aquifer, a giant aquifer that covers about 4 states. We will never run out of water. If you want water, good water, all you have to do is dig down. You don't want to drink well water out there because it's very high in iron. It'll give you diarrhea. But if you dig far enough down, and we don't have to, the county runs water out there. We don't even have to deal with wells. There are lines for water, regular water lines, just like in a city, that are run out there. The difference is they're big, long pipes that run way underground and have they're very long between places. That you will buy trash hole here when I live in California? Crazy, huh? Yeah. Oh, yeah. The land here is pretty inexpensive. It's why I'm kind of hoping that I get a piece of it. The land is about to be sold by my generation comes before me because they need the money for their retirements. However, we're working on a way that maybe I can get a chunk of that for myself. And I'm hoping to do that. This is really where I hope to go and outright retire when I get older. There are personal things going on that make it unlikely that I'm going to have people looking after me. So this is what the road turns into, is a pair of ruts. And the ruts, these are actually what's been used by ranchers for decades, close to a century now. When they had covered wagons, those ruts were used. Now here you can see we're inside of the valley now, kind of looking down into the valley. Here is about where I figure out that I've got my my zoom turned on, and it jerks worse with the zoom. But this is part of the valley here. It's part of the land that's in my family yet. This chunk we're seeing is from land that's owned by my crazy relative. I always go out there with my Model 1911 pistol. Here, I figure it out, see? Not on zoom anymore, which makes it a little bit less jerky. And you can see a little bit more of the valley and the river that runs through there. Again, not identifying the river so as to not upset my relatives by geolocating this in any way. So we turn into ruts here. And the ruts just keep getting worse, as you will see in the last part of the footage that I've got going on here. But yeah, $500 to $700 an acre is what this runs for out there. Probably on the high side right now. It's a bit of a seller's market right now. Have you ever done fishing that river? Yes, you can. The main thing, you don't get great stuff out of it. The main thing you get is catfish. I know people who, hate catfish, but that's the primary one that you get out there. I have done some fishing out there. When I was younger, I'd fish out there with my grandfather. You can certainly get fish out of it. It's certainly where I live. We also have deer on the property. We go hunting there from time to time. We know about conservation. You only ever kill the bucks. You kill the bucks that have the most horns because they're the oldest ones. You do not kill the does because they're the ones that are going to give you more, deer in the future. You don't kill the younger bucks because they're the ones that are going to do the breeding. There's elk out there now. It's possible that a company that buys elk property may buy the property when it gets sold. I'm not going to see the part of the property that I want to pull off and tear off and keep for myself. That's rather theoretical at the moment, but I'm really hoping to get that piece of property. There's a house on it that has been declared a South Dakota monument. It is the house that my grandmother grew up in, that my great-grandfather actually built with his bare hands when he was the first one to do any pioneering out here. It was originally just a log cabin, straight-up log cabin, that now has another more modern building attached to the cabin, but it is considered a South Dakota landmark. And that is the piece of the property. You won't see it here. Because in order to live there, I will have to do a bunch of work, but that is the part of the property that I hope I will be able to purchase when it goes. Now, you see here one of the other things that happens with these ruts, and you'll see it real bad in a second. One of the things that happens with these ruts is after use, because of how the water works out there, driven through too many times, they will get too deep. And I worried at one point that they were too deep even for my Jeep. You'll see that there's a second pair of ruts that's being created because what's happening is the ranchers out there, when they go, they don't want to get the ruts too deep So they start straddling the ruts, and it creates a second pair of ruts that then gets used for a long period of time. And then they get too deep, and they start straddling over, so it kind of goes back and forth. But you can see I'm straddling the ruts here rather than being in the middle. Did I better bother putting... Oh, the Jeep is in four-wheel drive right now. It was in four-wheel drive the moment that I opened up that first gate at the top of the hill. Four-wheel drive is useful here. You'll see why in a moment. As I say, these ruts get a little deep in places, and you kind of want to go away from them. Well, I went a little too far off-road, and it's about to come up, if I recall correctly. You notice there in front of me, you got some very deep ruts. I was afraid that it would bottom out if I was in those ruts. So I went over, and then I hit a spot right here, where or right about in here someplace where I thought I need to get back on the ruts because of what's happening to the countryside here. But you can see the ruts are very deep off to the left. And I'm like, I got to get back in those things. I don't know what to do. And this right here, I thought there that I was going to topple the Jeep. I thought that I was going to flip the Jeep. And that's why my camera went all to hell, because I had gone very, very far over on the left wheels. I thought I was going to topple the Jeep, and I didn't. Bessie will go anywhere. I have rarely taken her out to do what's going on here. Bessie will go anywhere. Good old faithful Bessie. I thought I was going to topple the Jeep, but no, Bessie just went over on her side, and that was fine. She didn't mind. Superguru 63 says, you only kill what you eat, and have taught my daughters that also. Yeah, we do exactly the same thing. Anything that we hunt, we will take into a butcher, and they will butcher it for us, turn it into all kinds of things. You can get it made into steaks. You can make it ground into, it's venison, so you can make it ground. It tastes a little different. It's a little bit gamey, but it's fine to eat. Yeah, one deer will give you a freezer full of, a big freezer full of meat that you can eat for the next 6 months or a year, if that's all you eat. So yeah, we always eat what we kill. Absolutely. You will note that the ruts are getting more and more like grass. That's because this part of the pasture land has not yet been grazed this year. You always graze in different parts of the pasture land. You use one part until it's used up, and it's very low. Then you move the cattle over into another part of the pasture. Well, this part has not yet been grazed. So not many people have been out on these roads. In fact, I think maybe only a couple or three have been out here. So you'll notice that the ruts are getting, more and more difficult to even see. There have been times when I'm out there where I was the first person to be out there, and what happens then is you don't see the ruts at all. You can feel them. You put your car into the ruts and just kind of let the car take you. There's a place here, too, and I just crossed over it where I was afraid that the rut was too deep. That's where it was. I was afraid the rut was too deep, and I almost bottomed out that Jeep, which is pretty high. Let's see. What did the fourth doctor end up doing with Bessie? He left it with Unit, and it was brought back briefly with the sixth doctor. One thing you can see here, there's some dots in the front of the car. That's where finally some grasshoppers got smacked against the windshield. They were getting smacked against the windshield the whole time. I was worried that it was eventually going to cover the field of view on my camera. Is smoking meats jerky popular there? Yes, you can have your animal turned into jerky. I've had parts of deer that I've hunted out there turned into jerky as well. So again, wondering what people do when they get to want to get across something. Well, here's what you do. You get out of your Jeep or your car. You take off the stuff that's holding the fence post in and move it the hell out of the way. And then you drive through. It's a little easier when you got two people. I used to do this all the time with my grandfather. He'd sit in the driver's seat. Or sometimes I would. I learned to drive at 12 out here on this property because when you get to a certain age out there, there's no law. It's all private property. You can do whatever you want. So you learn to drive pretty early on. You can see it's a little jumpy here, but you learn to drive pretty early on. And if you can, do heavy equipment, that's what you do. Everybody does chores from an early age. So if you can drive the heavier equipment, the combines, everything, stuff like that, you learn to drive pretty early. I learned to drive when I was 12, and so I'd sometimes be driving a pickup. You have to go out and check your cattle once or twice, at least a day, because if you don't, cattle can get tangled up in barbed wire. They can crawly cows will escape through the barbed wire into somebody else's pasture, and you get them out quick, because every blade of grass out there is actually very important. You're feeding cattle out there. Every blade of grass matters. So you have to check them a couple of times a day, so you do that. And the thing about being out there is that you have to be a little bit of everything. You have to be very, very independent. You'll always get help from your neighbors, always. But you have to be something of a, you have to be a rancher, you have to be a farmer, you have to be a veterinarian, you have to be something of a medical doctor. I have an uncle who did not wait to be born at the hospital. My grandfather delivered him. You have to be you have to be a mechanic. You have to be able to, fix your own equipment, whether it's a pickup truck or a piece of heavy equipment. They don't have gas stations out there. What you have is a very large, fuel container of your own, and they come out in a truck once a month or so to refill it. So you have to be able to do everything out there. You have to be a carpenter. Everything is a very generalist sort of life. It's one of the things that I always point out. This is why this part of the country votes red, because they are individualists. When you get into cities, cities you become more socialist because you become somebody who works on one specific thing. I am an IT guy. I know computers. I don't know much about my car. If I have a problem with the car, I take it in. You can see, by the way, I believe there's it's a little right there on the right side. I think you're seeing a grasshopper that sat on top of the car and went with the ride for me. I've had grasshoppers that went the entire ride from South Dakota to Nebraska. But when you get into cities, you become specialists. You have to rely on other people. And so cities tend to become more socialist over time, as opposed to being individualist, because the people who are individualists are living out here. The specialists are living in cities. And so that's why cities tend to be more blue, while people out here tend to be red. They are individualists as opposed to specialists. And specialists rely more on a socialist sort of living. But out here, I always mention there's a family cemetery out here that someday I will have a headstone in. And we buried both my grandmother and my grandfather. When I mean we. Myself and the surviving sons and a couple of cousins, we buried them. There's a cousin out there who has a backhoe. He dug the hole. We lowered the casket in, and then he covered it up with the backhoe. If you don't do it, it don't get done. You have to be an individualist. You're forced to by circumstance. Now, again, if you have problems of some kind, you will always get help from your neighbors. Partly because that's just what you do, and partly because you want to, have the goodwill and help them out when they need help. So you always have the help from your neighbors, even if they're 30 miles away, which can happen. This particular property, goes to is adjacent to a guy who's crazy. I always carry my Model 1911 pistol in the seat next to me when I'm out there, because the guy's nuts, and you never quite know what he's going to do. I don't think he's ever going to harm me physically, but you never know. He's nuts. He would be, I think, diagnosed as a true paranoid schizophrenic. But otherwise, that guy, he's crazy, but almost everybody else will give you a hand. At some point here, I'm going to have to cut the video off. This is a long one, and it actually shows the building. My relatives don't like me showing that. I may allow it to run just long enough to see the cabin that we have out there. It's not a log cabin. This is just this is a building that was moved out there, and it's like any other building. It's the background in my chroma key image here is that. So again, this is how you get through the fences, and you always put them back up. You never leave a fence down like that, a gate down like that, because the cattle could be grazing out there, and you do not want them to go from one pasture to another. That's what the rancher wants. He'll decide which pastures he needs to go in, because he'll go from one to the other. But that's how you get through it. You open the gate, drive through it, and close the gate back up behind you, because you just never know where the cattle might be. Again, this is not currently being grazed, although while I was out there, the neighbor did have some cattle grazing in there for a little bit, not for very long. This is going to be real short. I'm going to be shutting this off real shortly, so I'll get back to my people who are in the chat right here so I can answer your questions. This is the bottom, almost the bottom of that valley. Turns out I talked to my one second cousin or something who's out there. He's a good guy. He's a friendly guy. We talked for about 2 hours. They call that visiting out there. We visited for about 2 hours, and he was telling me about how my great grandfather, when he ranched this, he chose the exact right place. Because the cattle can pretty much be left on their own, even if there's bad weather and stuff, because you can get really bad snow out there. Now, up in front, this is the last piece of thing. You can see towards just a little off of center frame, there's a building. That's where I'm headed to. That is the ultimate destination here. I'm going to let you see it just from the outside a little bit. Don't tell my relatives. I don't know how they'd feel about that. At this point, I don't care very much, but that's where I'm headed. That little building out there, it's very nice inside now that I've cleaned the hell out of it. There's a couple of, you can see a couple of storage things that my uncles have built over time. And it's walled off with fencing because we don't want cattle to get in there. And that is all that I'm going to let you see of that. I did take it out and walk in through it, but I'm not going to let you see any more of that because I think my relatives wouldn't like it. So that is a trip out to my family ranch land from starting in Walls, South Dakota, the eastern port of entry for the Black Hills tourist trap. All right, let's see here. You get distracted and lose the road. Again, it's mostly ruts. You just follow the ruts. And yes, it is beautiful out there. I love it out there. I very much want to retire out there, and that may be a possibility. You won't get many live streams from me out there. I had hoped to maybe be able to live stream from there last week, but the internet is at that place. I mean, you can get better internet. It's just that the internet that I was using was coming off of my phone. And you get 4G out there. Everything's fine. You can get 4G. It works out there. The ranchers always keep their cell phones on them so that people can call them on it. I called my second cousin, the guy the good one, out there several times, and you can get good connection. It's just that trying to do a tether off of this and run a decent live stream turned out to be just about an impossibility. If I went out there to live, maybe I'd try to get a better internet connection. They're always getting better all the time out there, like they are everywhere else. One of the nice things about being out there is they don't have much government regulation in terms of laying down cable. You could just go out and make sure that you're not hitting the electrical wire, but a lot of that's run on poles. Just make sure you're not hitting electrical wire or not hitting the water line, which isn't hard not to hit. And you just lay your cable. Eventually, when it's cheap enough, they'll have fiber out there. They don't do now, but eventually they will. Just give it some time. Let's see. I'm glad that people are jealous. I love the place. Again, I would love to live out there. One of the things that I could not show, and I really would have liked to, I don't have a camera that would show it, is the night sky. On a clear night, it is amazing. It is really amazing. If you've only lived in cities or even small towns, you have never seen the sky like this. It's absolutely clear. You can see the Milky Way in all its glory. You can see everything. If the ISS is passing overhead, and it's obvious when it is, you can see the ISS absolutely clearly. You know what it is because the way it passes is a rather rapid straight line, and nothing else in the sky moves like that. You can make out every planet. You can make out, galaxies that are far away, barely with the naked eye. It is absolutely clear, and it's an amazing sight to be at night. My father, when he was young, and I considered it while I was out there. My father, of course, he was in a bedroom with 3 other boys, and it was a small house. So part of the reason that he would do this is at night he would take his bed and just put it out there and sleep outside. I did that once. Not because I had to. Oh, my God. Falling asleep under those stars is amazing. It's just amazing. It gets nice and cool out there. It can be 100 degrees. It was 100 degrees while I was out there. But at night, it'll drop way down into the 60s sometimes. So you're just laying out there, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. You think back to the people who pioneered that area every night. That's what they slept under. Just amazing to me. Are quad bikes popular in the U.S. or stable on Aussie farms? Depends. Out there, yes, you can get a quad bike, and one of my neighbors has one. The thing about it is out there, when it rains, because of what the last glaciers left behind, the ground turns into what they describe as gumbo. It's just this squishy gunk. And my Jeep will live through it. That's okay. My Jeep will live through that. But a lot of pickups won't. When it's bad or when there's really bad snow out there, my neighbor who ranches that land, that guy who's the sane one, he lives a little far away, but he ranches that. He will come in there on horseback. You will actually be sliding back to the 18th or 19th and early 20th century when horses were the mode of transportation. He sometimes goes on horseback out there because they're the only thing that can get through that gumbo reliably. So it depends on the weather. He's also got a Jeep, not like mine, much older, and not nearly in as good condition. You have to remember that the people who live out there do not make a lot of money. They don't make a lot of money at all. The margin on cattle over the years has been constantly decreasing. So unless you have a very large herd and a large spread, which most people don't have, it's hard to make money out there. What's happening now is that corporations are buying out huge chunks of land, and then they're employing the people who used to own the land to do the actual ranching. But the reason that works is the larger a spread you have, like if you have a bad rain over here that makes it hard for any of the grazing to go on, you can still move your cattle over there, and it needs to be a large spread, a large area of land. Small spread like this one, if you get a problem, you're just screwed. It happens that my neighbor told me, and I don't have any knowledge of it because I have a grounding in what it takes to ranch out there, but I didn't do it for a living. I was out there until ages 5 to 15 for anywhere from a couple of weeks to a month with my grandparents, so I have a grounding in what's necessary out there, but I've never actually done it. But, he tells me that the margin has been constantly decreasing, and so what's happening is these big companies are buying places up so that they have larger spreads, so that they can continue to make money where an individual rancher can't. And it's too bad because, family ranches, family farms are really disappearing, and that's part of the reason is you get these companies buying them up. But in terms of having, transportation out there, it just depends on what the weather's like. Like I say, sometimes you will see a cowboy on a horse. People still wear cowboy hats out there. They wear jeans. They wear cowboy boots. And not because it's some affectation. It is functional. We have out there diamondback rattlesnakes. Loaded in my Model 1911 pistol is shot shell. And that's because if you run into a snake, you kill them. You just kill them. They're bad for everything. They're bad for the human beings. They're bad for the livestock. They're just bad. If you run into a rattlesnake, you kill them, period. End of story. The best way to kill them, honestly, is to get close enough with a shovel and stab them, and cut them behind the neck. You cut them behind the head, just chop their heads off. I don't usually have a shovel, so I keep shot shell, and I have killed more than one rattlesnake with shot shell out there. Plenty of firewood for the picking. Absolutely. Yes. Solid fuel, for hot water and cooking. No, the water comes into again, that's something that the county has. They maintain, water lines that come in. You don't see it here. This is the interior of the cabin. This is the interior part of the living room. This thing, as you see over my shoulder, this big giant pot-bellied stove has a history. That stove used to be, in a, motel. Way back at the turn of the 20th century. That was in a motel that was part of where the Black Hills have been a tourist trap for over 100 years. And there was a motel there off the road that belonged to part of my family. And that thing heated the entire motel. And it heats that place great. And as you say, yes, there's the water comes in. There's a hot water heater in there, just like a normal place. And one of the things you do when you go out there is you turn, because nobody's out there very much, you make sure the electricity is off when you leave. You make sure all the water is drained out of the hot water heater. It's drained out of all the lines. If it's wintertime, you winterize. You do all that stuff. But the water comes in from the county, and it works great. It's just like a normal home. This thing here heats the place very, very nicely in the wintertime. You have a lot of cut wood. At the very tail end of that, as you passed through looking at that thing, I didn't look at it long on purpose. But there is a big firewood pile in front of the cabin, and if you want to be warm in the wintertime, you keep stoking this fire here. At night, when it gets cold out there, which it's very cold in the wintertime, I've been out there in the wintertime because that's when hunting season is in November, and it's cold. It's really cold. So in order to get through the night without freezing to death, you get what's called a nightstick, and that is a big, old, giant piece of log that barely fits through the door, and you put that in there for the night. And even then, at 6 a.m., you got to get back up, go out in the middle of the freezing cold, and get some more wood, because it'll be too cold by then. But that thing, if you keep it fueled, will very nicely make the entire cabin nice and warm in the wintertime. And yes, there's a lot of downed trees out there. If you're running short on firewood, you get a chainsaw, and you just go out and saw the things up and drag them back. Most people have pickups that they just fill up with logs. If it was me, if it was low, I would just go out there. There's a chainsaw that's out there. I would go out with a chainsaw, maybe take out the rear seats in the Jeep, and just fill the Jeep up with wood and make 2 or 3 loads and go back and forth with that. Super Cruise 63 says, I'm a car guy. If I lived closer, we could do trade labor because I'm computer illiterate. Yeah, that's something that happens out there too, to some extent. But again, out there, you really do have to be very much a generalist, an individualist, someone who does everything on their own, someone who doesn't mind living miles away from the nearest neighbor. You saw out there, I didn't point it out, but the nearest house to that one belongs to my crazy guy neighbor, and I don't know that you could necessarily count on him for anything. But the guy that we do count on, well, his house was at the bottom of that hill that still had the 1-lane gravel road. So all of that drive back over to get to that cabin, if I needed help from him, and I did one time, he had to drive that whole way. And it happened that I saw him in the wintertime once on a horse. He took his Jeep when he was out there and had to give me a hand. But that's at least 4 miles up through terrain that's difficult to get through. So, you get help, but you still have to be something of an individualist. I got training early on about being bit by a rattlesnake. Back then, the training was, if you're bit by a rattlesnake, you use a tourniquet. That's part of why cowboys out there do wear those bandanas. Partly it's because sometimes you get dust out there that's really bad. You turn around and put the bandana on your face this way. But also it can act as a tourniquet. If you're bit by a rattlesnake, hopefully you have a person with you, because it used to be you put the tourniquet around, make a cut in the skin where the bite was, and then try to suck out the poison, and then head to the doctor at the fastest pace that you can get. But you saw how far away the nearest doctor is in Wall, so you're racing your poison. Now we've learned that cutting open doesn't help much, so you just put the tourniquet as tight as you possibly can, get a tight belt or something, get a piece of clothing, tear off a piece of clothing, wrap it around above where the bite is, and drive like hell. Get your cell phone out, call 911. They'll send some paramedics, but it'll take an hour to get there. You're going to take an hour getting inside. Hopefully you meet them somewhere on the way, but you're going to be fighting unconsciousness and death the entire time. That's how individualist it is. You must be prepared to die if you don't do things right. There was one time, in fact, my daughters were out there with me when they were much younger, and we were out walking along near the river. And I said to them, stay behind me, walk where I walk. And there was some downed logs over there, and the kids, being as young as they were, they thought, it'd be fun to go and play on the logs. So they're walking along, balancing on the log, and then we heard a rattlesnake rattle. And I said, my kids, stop. I said, stop where you are. So I went over to where my kids were, and sure enough, there was a rattlesnake that was sitting, because rattlesnakes like places that are like under wood, someplace that's nice and cool for the most part. Yeah, and there was a rattlesnake under the wood, under the log that my kid was walking along, right under there at the end. Pulled out my pistol with the shot shell and killed it. But it was an object lesson for my kids. They stayed behind me for the rest of the time. Whenever you're going places like that, you kick the wood, because they'll react to stuff. If you're going onto a porch or something out there where the cabin is, you pound on the porch with your foot. If you're going into a less maintained building, you stamp your feet around to make sure that we'll have rattlesnakes react to that. You have to be prepared to treat yourself, and then scream your way into town as fast as you possibly can, fighting unconsciousness. And if you're not prepared to do that, you just lay down where you are and you die. You have to be an individualist. It's required. Blazer Wonderman says, how can you drive through the road in this at night? Most of the time, you don't. If it's necessary, you can feel the ruts. You don't necessarily see them, but you can plant your car in it. And sometimes when I'm out there, you don't even have to have your hands on the wheel. It's like being on some kind of train track. The car almost goes by itself. You can feel the ruts. Blazer or winter, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Again, in the wintertime, you just end up either driving something that's, can navigate the terrain, or, like I say, sometimes you're on a horse. There's just no way around it. Super 360, love hanging out with you guys and gals. Yes, I love my audience. Thank you very much for being on. You guys are wonderful. Tell all of your friends, of course, friends, family, neighbors, and pets, and livestock, and share me on social media. Like, sub, and hit that notification bell. Where the logs come, few trees. Actually, there's a whole bunch of trees that are down by the river. We didn't see too many of them, but there's a lot of downed logs out there. The last place that I drove up, there was and opened that fence on. The last place on that is the top of a floodplain. Everything below that can and has flooded. It's flooded out there twice in my lifetime. And when that happens, it brings along a lot of dead trees and stuff, and they just leave it there. It just drops down when the water recedes, and you let them dry, and those are great. Those are great to make great firewood. So there's actually a bunch of it that's closer to the river that you couldn't see. Pretty sure you can geolocate me, very possibly, Marshall, but you'd have to, yeah, is it visible from orbit? Yes, it is. But doing it the way that I did, I think that my relatives would be okay, because it would be a little, if you know how to use Google Maps, yeah, you could probably geolocate it. But to be honest, it doesn't matter. When they got a hold of me and they were worried that people would be going out there, like, nobody's going to go out there. Nobody's going out there. So, greenhouses, not really. The problem out there is water. There isn't much precipitation most of the time. I mean, you occasionally get those things where it'll flood, but that's from the Black Hills. That river starts in the Black Hills. I've actually seen the headwaters of it. The river starts in the Black Hills. Black Hills full of snow in the wintertime. And if it gets really bad blizzard up there, and that can happen, when it melts, it just comes down and floods the hell out of it. Most of the time, however, there's just, and if it floods, then that whole floodplain's useless. It isn't good for anything. You could put up a greenhouse, but the problem is, where would you get the water? You'd use up thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of gallons of water. You just don't get much precipitation out there. It is a natural prairie for a reason. The water that you get out there, it really does come from the county. You could make your own well, but you have to dig way down before you get to really potable water. The closer to the surface wells are all filled with a lot of iron that, if you drink it, will give you diarrhea. It's okay to bathe in, but it's not good to drink in. When my grandparents were out there and ranching, they didn't have a lot of water from town, and the wells were terrible. They had wells out there for doing things like, getting water for, and they had water in the house, but it was all from well water, and you don't want to drink it. So what they would do was they would gather water in a cistern. A cistern is an underground tank. And what you do is you get the water running off via God, I'm blanking on it, but the same things you see on houses where the water runs. Those would run off of buildings and into the cistern. And so you would go out from time to time. If you needed water, you'd go out there with a bucket, and you would pull water out of the bucket and put it into a larger container in your pickup truck, and then drive that back to the house. And then to strain it, it wasn't necessarily a good thing. It wasn't the best thing in the world, but it was what they had. You'd put a towel over it and strain the water through the towel so that you get all the stuff that might be in it. It wasn't everything, and the water always tasted a little bit different, but that's what you would drink out there. Not so much anymore because you get water from town, but back then, that was how they did it. They would get water from the cistern. That would be rainwater, and that's how you would drink the water out there. Is there snow out there? Oh, God, yes, there is loads of snow in the wintertime. It depends on the winter. That's about the only time you'll get any serious precipitation, is the wintertime. You can get a foot of snow or more. If it's a bad blizzard and they've had them out there, you get 3 feet of snow. And that's the other thing you have to be prepared for out there. The road is graded up, and they will plow it up to the point where I first entered that first fence. After that, no plowing. You really have a horse. That's what's for getting around when it's really bad like that. So you have to be prepared. People go out there before the winter starts, and you will stock up on 6 months worth of what you need, because you could be stuck out there for 6 months. It's possible. It's happened. So yeah, you can get a lot of snow out there. It's really the only time you have it. But the problem is the ground out there, because of what it is. The ground just sucks up the water and goes straight down. It doesn't really stay on the surface. So it's not very good for growing much of anything. That's why it's a natural prairie. That's why about the only thing that grows out there is stuff like hay and alfalfa, stuff that can grow with very little water. And greenhouses, the problem is where do you get the water from? Those fences, you meant the big one at the silo. Yeah. The big one of the silos has been that way since the end of the Cold War and has never been touched. Love the stream. Good company here. Yes, thank you. I love my viewers. Love my viewers very much. Satellite internet, that's available out there right now. Yes, absolutely. Marshall says Starlink be in the perfect spot latitude-wise. Yes, absolutely. Starlink is a possibility out there. The problem is that these guys don't make a lot of money. They don't make a lot of money. Most of the money that they'll make is when they sell their land. And that's when they're old, They have really good apps for astrophotography and asteroids. A strong suggestion that you grab one on a tripod for my next trip out there. I'll see if I can do that. Don't know when I'm going to be able to make it out there because of some issues going on that I don't discuss, but I could. It's, next time I'm out there, I'm going to go out there at some point before they sell it. Cast iron pot-belly stove is a beauty. Try finding one. Oops, you got the wrong thing there. Try finding one of that nowadays. Yeah, it's impossible. You couldn't find something like this. This is cast iron pot-bellied stove. If it was a different era, you would be taking off the top of it here, and you'd be cooking on it. That top right there is, from here up, is decorative. You could take that off. You could take that off and cook on that thing if you want to. You can kind of see in the back, that's where all the smoke's going, and there's a chimney and everything, and it's functional. When we use it in the winter, you go outside and you see smoke coming out of it. It is a step back into the late 19th and early 20th centuries. That's when this was built, and if I get the piece of property out there that I want, that will be moving out of this house and moving into the one that I will be having on that property, because it'll be what I use to heat the place in the wintertime. Can you ask Jeanette Bloom? Can I ask how many acres the family had altogether? When my great grandfather pioneered it, it was very large, very, very large. He broke it into pieces and gave it to his children. And that caused a lot of hard feelings between the children for some reason, to get broken to pieces. So the piece that is now still in my family is actually owned by a corporation. And the members of the family who are the generation right now after my grandparents, my father's generation, they own stock in this corporation. So the corporation, they don't own any particular piece of land. They own stock that represents the value of the land when or if it's sold. But I'm not going to say how many acres it is. Asking the number of acres, it's not because I'm offended. It's because I'm going to explain why. Out there, you don't ask two things. How big is your spread and how many cattle do you have? It's considered very rude. I'm not going to say I don't consider it rude to ask me how many acres is out there, but I'm not going to say because I think my family, if they found out, would probably object. It is not particularly, you could not live on it. You could not live by ranching cattle on it. It's not large enough for that. The neighbor who does ranch on there can live for himself, partly because he puts his cattle in there. But it's not the only place he puts his cattle. Getting very cotton mouth. Drop of Truth says, bandanas, is that the same as a neckerchief? Yeah, it's the same thing. We call it the same thing both ways. It's the same thing you see in westerns, where the cowboys or, the bad guys are wearing something across their face. It's usually tied in the front and just a knot lays over your back. If you need it for the wind or the dust, you bring it around, put it up over your face. And if you need it for something else, because you never throw anything away out there. Never throw anything away because you don't know what you might use it for. Again, you're out there by yourself. If something needs done, you do it or it don't get done. And so you don't throw stuff away because you never know what you can repurpose it for. The porch on that cabin was built by my uncles. The cabin itself used to be, when it first came in there, was placed on a floodplain. Bad idea. First time it flooded out, they got it moved up off the floodplain. But they left behind the porch. So when I was out there one time, I was probably around 2000, when I was out there hunting with my two uncles, we said to ourselves, how are we going to get this porch up there? So we took down the barbed wire fence that was around where the porch was, attached the porch to to one of the pickups that had a trailer hitch, via some wire that we found. There was some wire that somebody had used and then just left on a fence post. And that's what you do. You're like, okay, I got you done using this wire. I'll put it on this fence post. If I ever need some wire, I'll just come back to the fence post and pick it up. So we found this wire on a fence post. We wired it up to the board, the wood porch that they'd made, and then drug it up. And when we were done, we took the wire, we put it back where we got it, and we restored the fence into the condition that we found it in. If you don't do it yourself, it don't get done. The Jeanette is saying, yeah, bandana's the same as neckerchiefs. Excuse me. Jeanette says, we still have a cistern next to your house. Your husband wants to make it into a bomb shelter. Might work. I don't know. I once lived for a while in a house in a small town that had a cistern that was still filled with that. It had concrete over the top, but it was still functional if you wanted to use it. Meaning no offense. This first question is part of it. No. It's not. It doesn't offend me at all. I'm just explaining because I had it explained to me while I was out there. I spent a couple hours visiting with this semi-cousin of mine. I don't know what he is exactly to me, but a semi-cousin of mine. I spent some time out there visiting with him and asked him how many cattle he had, and he said, "Well, you're a city boy, and I largely have been, so you don't know, but that's considered really rude to ask." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I meant nothing by it. It was total ignorance." He said, "It's okay, dude. It's all right. I get it. I just want you to know." So you learn stuff out there all the time. I did not know that. I had no idea. So I'm not taking offense, Jeanette, at all. Just explaining that if you ever happen to be out there, don't ask how big the spread is or how many cattle they have. That's considered very, very rude. So, yeah, that was my trip out there. And then when I got there, the people who'd been out there before had, as I say, a piece of siding had fallen off that thing. Siding out there will probably last forever. But a piece of siding had fallen off, and because of that, mice had gotten in. They'd gotten rid of the mice, but there were still droppings around from here to there. And to be honest, the cabin isn't used that much. It's often just used for hunting in the wintertime. And so the floor, the old carpet on the floor, needed some serious vacuuming. The vacuum it needed was so serious that I burned out the motor on the vacuum cleaner doing it. I had to go into town. I took all of the linens. I took everything that was cloth related, and I took it to Rapid City, not Wall. There was not a to begin with. I needed to go to Rapid to get the new vacuum cleaner. I had to go to a Walmart there. Rapid City is like 20 or 25,000 people. The gateway to the Black Hills giant tourist trap is Rapid City. But it's a regular town like anything else. It's the largest city. You can go to a Walmart, which I did to get my vacuum cleaner. They have Targets. They have, movie theaters. They have tourist trap things for the tourists. But you can, and they had a very large regular laundromat there. I did 10 loads of laundry. And I had to bring back a new vacuum cleaner. When I was there, I chucked out any of the food that looked like it was even possible that mice had gotten into. I threw out any of the, because you tend to bring out a lot of, it's not used very much, so you tend to bring out a lot of plastic silverware and, paper plates and stuff like that. And I threw out any of those that were not covered by plastic because I didn't know whether the mice would have gotten them in. So I had to replace all that stuff too. I spent about $350 while I was out there to get everything in shape. But it is as clean right now as it has probably been in a long, long time. And all the linens are clean and ready for anybody who wants to be out there. So it's a good deal. Did I buy a wet and dry vac? No, I did not. I didn't want to spend that kind of money on it. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have one done out there. But no, I decided I was just going to do a regular vacuum cleaner. The difference is I didn't want one that had to take, bags. I did one of those vacuum cleaners that you can empty out because that'd be better out there than having to deal with bags. You never want to run out. So running out of something is always sort of first on your mind. I don't want to run out of something when I need it out there. So I replaced a lot of stuff that was out there. But it is very, very clean out there now. It is probably as clean as it will ever be. And as I said, one of the great things I found out there is after doing all that work, there's a rocker recliner out there. You can't see it here. Oops, this thing fell out. There's a rocker recliner out there. You can't see it here, but there's a rocker recliner out there. And I discovered those things are great for my back. I have lower back arthritis and sometimes see a chiropractor for it. Oh, my God. Rocker recliner. That was all I needed. So as soon as I got home, I went straight over to the Salvation Army and bought one. When I'm done here, that is the first place I'm going to go, is that rocker recliner. Who is the person in the bow tie in the background? Oh, God. This here. Yeah. This here. This thing. This cabin has this building has a history that I'm not really going to go into, I guess. It originated with my grandmother. She passed away a few years ago. The reason that this show is named SYL Ranch is because SYL was her cattle brand. That was the brand that was used on all of the cattle when my grandparents were ranching. There is really no SYL Ranch. It was never SYL Ranch. I just call it that. But that's sort of my way of kind of keeping the old lady alive a little bit longer, is the fact that I use that as my copy, my trademarked. It's actually serial marked. I paid money to get that thing serial marked. It's my serial marked logo. And I do that because I'm just trying to keep the old lady alive a little bit longer. But one of my other relatives, who sometimes goes out there, not very much, decided that she needed to make a corner, a memorial corner for my grandmother. So back there, you can barely see it, the wooden object right there. That is a rocker that she used to use all the time. You can't see it because it's behind this stove, but there's a little bit of sign there that my cousin put in that says Granny's Corner, and that's something we don't touch. This is just kind of a joke. One of my relatives, he does taxes, and that was something that the tax company that he works for sent him. They just thought it'd be funny to put it out there. It's just a stand-up cardboard thing that ended up behind that corner. I have no idea why. I don't know who put it there or why, but apparently my cousin approves of it. And so since she was the one that made up that corner. We leave it alone. We don't touch it. Nobody sits in that thing. We just leave it alone. So yeah, that's just a cardboard cutout. You can see other things in here that are kind of interesting. This right here, that's a dispenser for matchsticks. Most of the time, fires are lit out there with matchsticks. If you're going to do this one, you can't see it very well. I guess I could pull myself this way. And you can see down there is a bunch of newspaper. That's used. And then underneath it, you can't see it very well, but there's some smaller pieces of wood that would be used for kindling. You put the newspaper and the kindling and a smaller log into this thing, start the newspaper, it starts the kindling, and that will start the log on fire. And that's how you start a fire out there for that thing. There's also a hole in the wall here where we've got an electric fan. That's to push the air from the stove back into the other part of the house. 2/3 of the house you can't see, and I'm not going to show you. I'm not going to show you much about the inside of the house at all because I'm sure my relatives would object. But that's what you can see of this one. Does any of my family go trapping out there? No, it's not really good for trapping. They don't have that kind of wildlife. They have wild turkeys like you would not believe. There is a corral out there that belongs to the piece of land that I'm trying, hopefully, to get eventually. There's a corral out there that was used by my great-grandfather when he first was doing his work out here. And one time we saw an entire bunch of turkeys, flock of them, just sitting there inside of that. Just sitting there inside of that thing. And we're sitting there with shotguns and rifles because we're hunting, and we're going, if we all wanted to have 5 turkeys, we could just poof, poof, poof. And we'd have, the turkeys are out there like mad sometimes. So you can do turkey hunting. We didn't and still don't because my grandmother, for some reason, disapproved. But there would be endless amounts of turkey. When I was driving on the road, especially in the morning, I'm going back into town to do all that laundry and stuff. There were turkey in the road, You didn't see it, but the mornings and stuff, you find cattle in there that you got to slow down for and wait until they get across the freaking road. And they don't have a problem doing that. Cattle get nervous if there's people they don't know. They're not very smart animals at all. They're some of the dumbest animals on earth. But they will get nervous by people they don't know. It's better if you're going out there like I am, stay in a vehicle. They don't get frightened by vehicles so much because they see them all the time. But if they see people they don't know, they can get frightened. They always bellow in the mornings, and nobody really seems to know why. I have a theory. That cattle's their memories are so bad that they don't remember the sun from one day to the next. And so they see the sun in the morning and they start bawling at it. You always hear them, every morning by the hundreds. And I think it's just because they're so dumb. They have such bad memories that they don't remember from day to day. That's just my theory. I don't know if that's right. What sort of cattle breeds are popular there? I don't know the answer to that drop of truth because I'm not up enough to know what breeds there are out there. I know that you don't get those big-horned ones. In fact, most of the time, the cattle don't have horns at all, except for the bulls. Bulls tend to have horns, but they're not those huge horns, just smallish horns that'll go across. I remember having to deal with that on occasion because the horns don't necessarily grow nice. There was horns that would curl over. I remember there was one that would just curl over and was practically in some bull's eye, so you had to saw it off in order to keep from the bull going blind from its own horn. But most of the time, the cattle are sort of a reddish brown. I don't know what kind of cattle they are. I just don't know. I'm not that tuned into it. but there's some kind of reddish brown. No horns on the on the females, and the bulls usually have relatively small set of horns. Excuse me. Let's see. Dropper 2 says Angus are the best meat here in Australia. Yeah, you don't get the black Angus cows out there very much. I've seen some, like on the land that's closer to I-80, but the ones that I've seen all the time that my grandparents had were sort of reddish. And again, the females didn't have horns and the bulls did. What's the average price for meat out there? I don't know. I don't know right now. It's being heavily impacted by COVID, that virus. It's being heavily impacted by that virus because what happened, one of the first things that happened was meat processing plants shut down because they had the virus go through a lot of their employees. And so there was a time I was visiting with my neighbor and I asked him about it because I knew it was a problem. And there was a period of time where you could not sell them. You know, a couple of months where you could not sell a single one. There was nobody to take them. However, there was a butcher guy that we used to take in Wall, who we used to take the meat from the dead deer, and he would do the butchering on it. Well, he made out like mad. He made out so much he had to hire people on, and now he's doing meat supply where what they oftentimes do is for winter they'll kill a cow or something and eat that meat all winter. And he said that if he wants a cow this year, he'll have to go out there and give him one right now because he's months out. So he's making a killing. Some of the bigger meat processing plants are shut down, and it's hard to get. He said, my relative said it was really hard to even sell anything for a while. It's getting better now as they start to reopen the plants. They also had processing plants that were like pork that shut down. And that impacted the pork farmers and stuff that are mostly in Iowa. The thing about South Dakota is it is bisected by the Missouri River, and the people who are on the west side of it call them living on West River. People on the east side call themselves living on East River. And there's a big difference because the Missouri River, for some reason, when that was left, it was either one of two things. The glaciers retreating left different types of soil. The one that's West River just grows grass most of the time, and the one that's East River, and as you move into Iowa, you get into soil that can support different kinds of crops. Not sure if that's the glaciers, or it may have been from when the last eruption of the Yellowstone caldera. My entire life. The caldera, they always go on, oh, it's close to erupting, blah, 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 blah. Well, close to erupting means sometime within the next 30 or so thousand years. Anytime you hear them talking about, oh, the Yellowstone caldera is about to blow, is activity, and I've heard that my whole life. Sometime in the next 30,000 years. But when it erupted the last time, the pyroclastic flow, which is superheated ash and gas, the pyroclastic flow from that ran at least to central South Dakota and maybe as far as Iowa. And in Nebraska, a huge chunk of Nebraska was covered. All of Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, just this huge bunch of pyroclastic flow. So when that finally cooled down and left behind, well, it didn't leave behind volcanic rock. It left behind this soil. And so West River, the soil turns into something very different and is very just a natural prairie that was once just hundreds of thousands of bison. That's where the bison ran because it was a natural prairie, and they all got killed off by the settlers. And there are some people out there now that are ranching bison. The problem with them is keeping them inside the fences, because the fences that I showed you that are good for cattle are useless for bison because they're twice as high. At least maybe 2.5 times as high. So it gets kind of crazy trying to keep them out there. But there's some crazy people who are doing that now. There are some rich people like from Hollywood that have decided that they want to try their hand at ranching bison. Turn the prairie back over to the bison. Well, that ain't going to happen. But there are people out there that are trying to ranch bison. And they sell buffalo burgers. They sell them at Wall Drug. There is a large restaurant in Wall Drug. They call it the Wall Drug Cafe. You can get anything there, really, but they sell things like buffalo burgers. I didn't go in there this time around. I just didn't feel the need to, and there was no good time. Oftentimes we'll stop in there for lunch or breakfast or something like that. But I am on a real limited diet. There's not much that I could eat in there anyway, and I'd already had something that morning, so I just went on. But they have a room in there that all around the several rooms and several posts that are load-bearing that have wood things that have carved into them all of the cattle brands in South Dakota. And so not only is the SYL brand on one of those, and I know exactly where it is, so are several of my uncles, my father. They had their own brands when they were young. They're not used anymore. But there are brands out there that belong to various Native American tribes. They're all over there in Wall Drug. I have pictures of it. It didn't occur to me to try to put it up. I suppose I could create a card for it, but it's not that impressive. It's just a piece of wood that's got SYL and whose name it is, who used it, William and Sylvia Stone. So, let's see. The most popular breeds in South Dakota is Angus and Herefords. Yeah, Herefords the Angus are the black ones, Herefords are the other ones, and that's what they mostly had. So you're probably looking that up someplace, so you're probably right. Could they sell the leather? Dropper Truth says, do people tan their own hide? No, they don't tan their own hides. It's the 21st century. People buy clothes and stuff. They buy pre-made boots and things like that. Could you tan it? Yes. I suppose probably someone does commercially, and they sell them, various clothes or boots and stuff like that at Wall Drug. Because you can buy all that stuff there. Be aware, if you're going to Wall Drug, it is a tourist trap. You're getting whatever you're buying, you could buy half the price at a regular store. It's just a tourist trap. It's a Western themed tourist trap, is what it is. Am I? Troubleshooter says, am I on the electrical grid out there? Yes, it is on the electrical grid. At this point, is there propane or diesel generator? We do have a tank of propane out there. Don't have any generators out there right now, but there is the propane. Could you live off the grid out there? Yes, you could. You could. There would be enough in terms of lighting and all that this thing will keep you all winter. In the summertime, you run 2 air conditioners out there to keep this thing cool. And that's a new thing. That's thanks to me. There's a big air conditioner out there that was intended to be used for a hotel room, but it wasn't installed correctly. And so it doesn't really cool the entire building. But I had a rolling air conditioner that I used at a place that I lived that did not have central air. And when I moved out of there, I didn't need it anymore, so I took it out. Well, put that in the living room, and between that and the other one, it's cool as everything. It's wonderful. Oftentimes when I was out there before and it got to 100 degrees, you were still sweating in the house? No. Not a problem. But if something went wrong with electric, you can live out there in 100 degrees. You can live out there. It's when I was growing up and I was out at my grandparents' ranch land, yeah, they had an air conditioner, but sometimes they didn't run it. You can live out there. You get used to it. It's like anything else. You get used to the weather. If it's like the winter time. You got to make sure that sometimes that you got everything covered up. But you get used to the cold, beyond up to a certain point where it's not dangerous. You get used to the heat. It's just something you can live with. Running electrical stuff would be about impossible if there was something wrong with the electrical grid, but you can cook. If it's something that needs to be kept cold, that would at this point be something of a problem. But believe it or not, there's all kinds of books out there. There used to be a one-room schoolhouse that was a large travel trailer. And in that thing is still out there on the land. It's part of the one that I hope to get. That thing was dragged out there and left. The mice have never gotten into it. I took out of there one time and left in the cabin a first edition, The Beasts of Tarzan. like from the early 20th century, a very first edition. They have all kinds of books out there that were textbooks. It is incredible to look at from a historical standpoint as somebody like me who is extremely critical of the modern educational system. Really interesting to look at because you get to see just what the educational level was. You have all these books out there, the math textbooks, the history textbooks, and they're thick, and the print is tiny, and yet that was what they were teaching people. That's how much a better education they were getting in a one-room schoolhouse. And my uncles went to that one-room schoolhouse until they were 13, 15 years old or something like that, and then they started being bussed into Wall to the high school. But that's the kind of education they got out there on those books in this tiny print. Far better educated than anyone coming out of a modern school today. If you watch my show for very long, you discover that I'm extremely critical of the modern educational system. I have an entire video series about it, about how bad it is and how it got that way. Because I've observed it over a long period of time, and I've listened to the master, Robert A. Heinlein. He wrote about it, and he wrote a great article called The Happy Days Ahead. It's online. You can look it up. Just Google The Happy Days Ahead and maybe Heinlein, Heinlein, and you will find it. Read that thing through. Interesting thing about Heinlein was he was a compulsive newspaper clipper. He would go through newspapers. Anytime that there was a story about some particular subject, he would clip it out and then put it in a file about that particular subject and put it in a filing cabinet. So it came around to 1980, and he was going to write an article. For some reason, I don't know why, he was getting paid. He always did. He wrote an article about the decline of education. And he had an entire thick thing full of newspaper clippings that went back to the beginning of the 20th century and 80 years worth, roughly 80 years, maybe 60 years worth. And he could go through and look at exactly how it had declined and when and where and why. The practical upshot of it was, and you can see this in action at that one-room schoolhouse, a school teacher of 100 years ago needed to know this much in order to be able to teach all the various students at all the various levels. Well, the next generation of teachers said, that's really a lot. There's really no reason we need to teach Latin anymore, because they taught Latin. My parents learned Latin in high school. So they said, this next generation of teachers said, let's take some things out of the curriculum that really don't seem to need anymore. The next generation of teachers did the exact same thing. And the next generation of teachers did the same thing. And the next generation of teachers did the same thing. And here we are now, where we have nearly the blind leading the blind. I know from experience working as a teacher at the place that shall not be named, that we're turning out students who graduate from high school who can neither read nor write nor perform the most basic math. And that's not an exaggeration. They cannot read, they cannot write, they cannot perform the most basic math. My favorite anecdote about this, and I have a lot of them, was the person that I was tutoring one time who was unaware that books have page numbers. That's how bad it is. This individual, I shouldn't keep talking about that. This individual went through 12 years of compulsory education and never once cracked a book. That person and a lot of the people I taught can neither read nor write nor perform the most basic math. That's what we're turning out. Because 100 years ago, the educational level of a teacher was this. Today, the educational level of a teacher is this. They don't know anything, so they're not capable of teaching it. That's the basic upshot of it, and why how I'm such a big critic of it. But the master, Robert Heinlein, wrote about it in detail in that article, The Happy Days Ahead. And you can find that online. It is free to read. Do it. It is a perfect example of exactly how. And he wrote it in 1980. Extrapolate forward, and that's where we are today. Excuse me. A friend of yours lives in Belfouche in South Dakota. I have a uncle that lives in Belfouche. So, Dropper 2 says, has anyone ever used solar panels out there? No, they haven't, but solar panels might be a good possibility. The way that the house is situated puts one side facing the east and the other side facing the west. I suppose if you put solar panels on the roof, you could conceivably get decent enough power out of them. How much you would get, I don't know. It's worth thinking about if or when I take possession of a piece of property out there. I may look at the roof and see if it's worth thinking about putting something like that on. It might be. Root cellars and vacuum preserve jars. Amish have it sorted. Yeah, there are some out there. Unfortunately, one of the ones that I had at some point or another turned to cement. There's a lot of stuff out there that's just could have been left there over the years and nobody's ever taken care of it. That's one of the things I did when I was out there. I cleared those out, pitched those bottles because they were useless. Whatever was in them had burst out of the top and been turned to cement maybe a decade or two ago. I remember it being there since forever. I took that out, threw it away, and took the shelving it was on and scrubbed the hell out of it to get it into something that was useful. So, but yes, you could do canning out there. I have an aunt who does canning and stuff, so you could do that out there. Absolutely, yeah. Dropper 2 says, literacy in my parents' and grandparents' day was considerably more intense. Now millennials are baffled by four-syllable words. Yes, abso-frackin-lutely it was. My own parents, I mean, they had to learn Latin. You know, there were other languages that were electives. They learned far more about history than probably I did. My own history was terrible. I have since supplanted my history with my own self-study. What I walked out of high school knowing about history and what I learned in college was almost nothing. Almost nothing. Everything I've learned now was self-taught. And now you have people coming out who can't read. So how can they self-teach? It's not possible. You know, it's part of the reason we have this problem with all these friggin' socialists and communists is that they don't know the past. They were never taught history. They don't know that the entire 20th century is a textbook of how communism and socialism always fail and they kill millions of people in the process. Always goes past in my lower third. Socialism and communism always fail, killing millions in the process. The entire 20th century is a history book of that happening. But they've never been taught that. They've never been taught anything about, you know, the actual founding of this country. You know, they look at people like Washington and Jefferson and they see people who were slaveholders. Well, guess what? It was illegal to free them. You know, they couldn't. Jefferson tried over and over to make it so that, you know, they were free, but it was not possible. You know, and that went back to the colonial era, went under the British. You know, you couldn't free them. You know, but they look at that and that's all they see. They don't see all the things that Jefferson did, the amazing things that he did. Jefferson is my freaking hero in terms of someone historically. You know, he did some stuff that didn't work out well in the long term, but there was all kinds of other things that he did that did work out in the long term that were really good, and they aren't taught that now. They aren't taught that at all. I wasn't really taught that. You know, my parents and grandparents, they were. I wasn't really taught that stuff. I had to learn it, self-learn it. They didn't do what they do now in schools, which is denigrate them, but they didn't teach me all the amazing things they did. You know, World War I, right? I was taught World War I started with the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand. Well, that's technically true, but there was a whole lot that went into the history prior to being assassinated. It wasn't just, oh, okay, let's kill Archduke Ferdinand. Oh, it starts a war. No, there was all kinds of other sociopolitical and geopolitical stuff going on that made that a flashpoint. But I was never taught that. I had to learn that on my own, you know. And today they're not taught it at all. They wouldn't know about World War I. Most of them don't know. You know, if you ask them on the street, who did the United States fight in the Revolutionary War? They wouldn't know. You see it from time to time. People do videos like that. They don't know. They were never taught these things. You know, it's why they take Twitter seriously, right? You can't take Twitter's useless. Twitter is useless in terms of doing much of anything. Twitter is a marketing platform. That's what I use it for. It's what it should be used for. You can't make a coherent thought in the limited number of characters that has. But that's what they're capable of reading, if they can. That limited number of characters. Anything too long and forget it. They call it TLDR. Too long, didn't read. If you want to make a coherent thought, it's got to be long, but they can't read it. Excuse me. Yes, Super Crew 63. Now they're removing shop classes, so we get less educated and less skilled people coming out of shops, schools. Yeah, they had shop class when I was there, and for me it wasn't so good because I was always a guy who was interested in technology even before they had computers as we think of them today. But lots of guys that I know, got their first grounding in shop class. Hell, I took home economics. Mostly because I wanted to, be with the girls and eat the foods, because that's what it tended to be. Guys tended to take shop, girls tended to take home economics. I took one class of both, so I got to learn to cook a little food. Never really took, but I got to be around the girls, So that was, all that stuff's going away, So you don't get people who have those kind of skills, and that's problematic when it comes to what are you going to do for a living? Well, they want to send everybody to college. What do you teach in college? Well, remedial stuff. About the only thing that a college degree will prepare you for anymore is to flip burgers. You're a little better off if you go into what's called a hard science. That doesn't mean it's difficult. It just means it's a science that has a grounding in what you do in the real world, like computer science, IT, stuff like that. You do better there, but a lot of majors, you walk out of there barely knowing how to read, that they do remedial stuff. Remedial stuff that should have been done in K through 12, and all it really proves is that you can read. That's the main thing that a college degree will absolutely prove is you can. Well, not anymore. You can probably read, because you don't get that K through 12 anymore. Darbatu says bring back apprenticeships. Absolutely, I would say bring back apprenticeships even for IT. I think. When I taught people in IT, I had treated it more like, there was stuff that they had to do in labs and, things they had to learn that I had to test them on, but I also treated it a bit more like an apprenticeship, because we'd come up with topics and I would say, okay, here's the book way of doing things, but I will tell you, when you get out in the real world, you will run into this. It's going to be, yes, you do need to know how to do this, but when you get in the real world, this is what's going to be required of you. And so that's how I used to teach, was with an eye towards, I had been in this business for a long time. I knew what was going to happen when these guys got out, and I figured they ought to be prepared for it. And girls, there were females that I taught. So I said, this is what you got to be prepared for. Here's all the stuff you need to know, but when you go to apply it, this is what you have to be prepared for. Jeanette says, just hit me. You said water well has too much iron, but my well in the same aquifer, I think, and my water is fine. Do I know what the difference is? It's the North Platte aquifer. And it's probably the same one that's in Nebraska where you're at. It's a huge underground aquifer. I think it's a little closer to the surface in Nebraska. You get out to South Dakota, again, the place was covered with stuff left by the glaciers, stuff left by the last eruption of the caldera. Getting down to the aquifer is more difficult. You end up running into water that's closer to the surface, but because of all the gunk left behind, has all this iron. It's probably easier to get down into the aquifer from where you're at. It's probably closer to the surface. Drop 2 says, mentioned higher iron content in the water. Have I seen petrified cowboy boots and hats? No, I haven't. I have seen petrified trees that are rocks in the river that's by there. Lots and lots of that, yeah. Petrifies many things in a matter of 2-3 years naturally, less time under pressure. Again, don't see that so much with the boots and hats and stuff like that. Those things are just, you wear them until they're completely worn out and then put them someplace. You might need to use them later, but they don't really get petrified or anything like that. But I've seen lots of tree wood that's been petrified, absolutely. Drop Truth says, with any substantial war, there are usually many years of economic manipulation prior to its commencement. Yeah. Well, I think we're seeing some of that now. Yeah. And that says, my grandson starts an apprenticeship with a furrier blacksmith next week. Wow, that's cool. I haven't seen much in terms of blacksmiths, but I'm sure they're still out there. Probably a very different... No, I know they are. One blacksmith here on YouTube, you'll have to go out and find it, but I love him. He, like I, got irritated to the point where he just had to show something. There's always been, since 9/11, because of the press, Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. The BBC erroneously reported that Building 7 in the World Trade Center had gone down. It had not yet gone down. They didn't get inside information from anybody. It was not scripted that they were supposed to say that it went down at a certain time. They just were erroneous because they can't get the facts straight even when they try, especially in a situation like that where everything's coming fast and furious and you just don't know what's happening. So they reported that it had come down, and it hadn't. And so everybody said, ooh, it's a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy. And by the way, how can a building fall anyway? The metal doesn't, it won't, melt at the temperatures that, that they talk about. It should have stayed up. So there's one blacksmith on YouTube. Did an amazing thing, right? He gets a piece of iron. He says, this is the exact type of rebar that they were using in that thing to hold that building up. Put it in, said, see, it's good and solid, doesn't move around. Put it into his thing. Got it good and hot. Not melting hot, just good and hot. Put it in the thing and bent it. Well, yeah, it doesn't melt at that temperature, but at the temperature that he put his forge up to, that was the same temperature that was, being done by the fuel in there, it doesn't melt, but it bends. It's really easy to bend. He was just like moving around with his hand. Okay, that's why the building fell. It wasn't that it melted. It was that the structure in there got so hot that it would bend. It wasn't melting. It was bending. That's why. And it was all started because the press got it wrong, as they always do. Super63 says, I took home ec, wood shop, metal, auto shop. Yep. And plastics, fiberglass fabrication. Actually got the Coast Guard certified for fiberglass fabrication in high school. Cool. Yeah, you used to be able to do that sort of thing. Now you can't. And just today, I get called every time my congressman does what's called, God, how did I get that kind of grease on my head? Good Lord. Hang on a minute. I see why I'm shining now. I don't know. I've got some sort of grease or something on my forehead. I noticed that my forehead and my cheeks were shiny. Where did that come from? I think it came from my car, actually, now that I think about it. Anyhow, you used to be able to do that sort of thing, and now you can't. In fact, my congressman, he calls whenever they do a, quote, town hall meeting, and they'll call me, and I'll put him, on my speaker, and I'll listen. And this time, they were going on about all the stuff that they were going to do at the University of Nebraska and the high schools and how they were going to move people apart, get fewer people in the dorms, and do a lot more online stuff. I'm just like, bad idea. To begin with online, your instructors have to know how to do it. It's totally different. And I know, I've done this stuff. It is totally different than in-person teaching. Your instructor has to know how to do it. And when you get into things like labs for IT, okay, theoretically you should be able to do those remotely. In real life, you cannot. In real life, you can't, especially when you get into Windows-related things. I'm not talking about stuff that occurs on your desktop. I'm talking about stuff that happens on the back end on servers that you never see. You can't do that online. You must be in a laboratory situation where your instructor can be called over every 5 minutes. I had that happen every single time I did labs. Student was stuck on something, and they need my help, and I'd go over to them. Next person stuck on something, I'd go over to them. Next person. I had people in queues. Somebody would say, hey, I need you, and I would say, okay, you're number 3. Somebody would say, I need you, okay, you're number 4, hang on, I'll be to you. I was going back and forth all the time. And that's because you get these labs, and on paper they look like they're going to work right. But when you actually do them, they suck. And you have to, I had labs that I would have to go through the labs. When I first was teaching a class, the first time I would teach one, I would have to go through every single lab and rewrite them so that they'd work. It's that bad. The textbooks themselves on some of those are crap when it comes to actually writing them. I would have to walk through and rewrite every lab so that it would actually be something that a student was capable of doing. And now they're talking about making this stuff remote. I heard them talking about making like theater classes remote. Well, I'm sorry. Way back when, a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, I was once an actor. You can't do theater classes remotely. That's stupid. And they're talking about doing the same thing with, K through 12. No. That's going to make it much worse. First off, it has to be a class that's amenable to be doing remotely. Second off, your teacher has to know how to do a class remotely, and most of them don't. Most of them are computer illiterate. I used to support them. They don't know what they're doing on their own computers, much less how to do remote stuff. And third and most important, you have to have a dedicated student. It requires a lot more dedication for a student to do something online. When you're in person and you say, okay, this is what I want out of you, here's the test, this is the day the test is going to be, and here's what I need for you for coursework, here's the labs we're going to do, that doesn't take the same kind of dedication. It takes showing up and doing the work. If you're going to do it remotely, that takes a level of dedication that the average student doesn't have. They've never been trained to do that level of dedication. Even if the coursework is good and appropriate for a class, they don't have the dedication necessary. I've seen it. It is a totally other level of dedication. They don't have it. So this is going to make our education even worse. It's terrible. It is a terrible idea. And I couldn't get on, you're supposed to be able to make comments or ask questions, and I couldn't get on to say, no, this is a stupid idea. But if you're listening, Congressman Fortenberry, this is a stupid idea. Don't pay any money for these people. Don't listen to them. This is a dumb idea. Don't do it. You need more in-person teaching, not less. Back to my thing here. Dropper Tooth says, I have a few of those old, the turn of the 20th century and earlier chemical formula books. They're fascinating. Yeah, look at the size of the font. Just the size of the font. And the fact that those students were supposed to know everything in that textbook backwards and forwards tells you everything about how bad our education is now. Today, I will never forget, one of my kids had something they were doing in a history class, a skit about, I don't know, I think it was ancient Persians or something. This is high school, like sophomore, junior year. And they were going to be using construction paper to make things like swords and costumes. That's like third grade stuff. When they're learning this in high school, that's how bad it is. That's how bad it is. If you succeed in K through 12, you do it in spite of the system, not because of it. My kids are literally frighteningly smart. They are the ultimate recipients of generations of people who are pretty damn smart getting together. It was a breeding program, unintentional selective breeding program, where a bunch of people who were very smart got together. I'm pretty intelligent. I'm pretty bright. My wife is brighter than I am, my ex-wife. My parents, very intelligent people. My grandparents, both sides, very intelligent people. My kids just got intelligence genes. They're frighteningly smart. They succeeded in spite of the system. They succeeded because they are so damn smart, and they could go on and do very much more challenging work than just sliding through without opening a book. But you can get away with it. Let's see. Dropper Tooth says World Trade 7 on the BBC, very amusing. Like I say, yeah, they just got it wrong, like they always do. Thermite burns very hot indeed, and surprisingly easy to make. Yes, I had a minor affiliation with World Trade Center 1. When I was working for a company that had offices in one World Trade Center, and I know that like the weekend or the second weekend before, they shut down the building, and I knew that because they were shutting off power to my equipment. But they were not going around and prepping for anything to bring that building down. They just weren't. What they were doing had to do with heating HVAC stuff. They weren't going through there, because if you were going to cut that building down and have it, intentionally drop into its own footprint like it did, you would be down there sawing up, structural members like mad, and everybody would know that it was going on. You couldn't do that. My father, more religious than I, he said that to him, the greatest evidence that there is a God is the fact that those buildings fell into their own footprint rather than falling over, and destroying other buildings. But this was not intentional, not at all. The stuff that happened after it, in terms of our useless airport security theater that has now conditioned 2 generations to believe they have no rights in airports, that ridiculous stuff was opportunistic. But they didn't bring those buildings down on purpose. I'm certain of it. I'm dead certain of it. Dropper Cruz is saying to Super Cruz 63, if you need to fix a crack in a carbon fiber, then use super glue with black bicarbonate of soda. I didn't know that. Jeanette says, I agree. Remote learning is not feasible with today's students. No attention span for one thing. Well, again, it's not even just the students. It's the instructors. They have to be capable of producing work that can be used online. And most of them can't. The thing about computer literacy is it has not changed at all in the 40 years that I've been in this business. People are just as computer illiterate today as they were when I started out. It's just that they're illiterate about different things. But if they weren't totally computer illiterate, there would be no use for desktop support. And desktop support is an integral and important, indispensable part of any decently sized and larger company's infrastructure. You must have them. And they walk around and fix crap on computers that the users, they told them, okay, here's what you do to this. And then the next day they did the exact same thing. And it's all stupid stuff that's frustrating. And you come back and you end up going into a break room with your coworkers, and you just bitch about how stupid these people are. They are no more computer literate today than they were when I started out. If they were, you wouldn't need the people who work on desktops. Now, IT breaks into a number of different places. There's application development, which is one thing. And by the way, the people who do applications development don't know anything about the side that I worked on, which was the infrastructure side, the back-end servers and things like that. And then you have people that would do desktop support, and that's for everybody in a company, and they don't know a damn thing. The people on the receiving end don't know anything. They're just as computer illiterate today. And that goes for instructors. Instructors are just as computer illiterate, and they would not know, most of them, how to create work that can be done online. And even if they did, the students can't. It's the dedication part of it. Working remotely, like I've done many times, that requires dedication. You have to sit down and go, I'm going to do this work remotely. And instead of having people around you and a boss looking over your shoulder, you have to be able to say to yourself, I'm going to do this work without someone pushing me to do it. And that's the same thing with online work with students. They have to be capable of saying to themselves, I'm going to do this work without a teacher looking over my shoulder making me do it. And most students can't do that. It's just that simple. Dropper 2 says, here in Australia, many stations, colossal farms, 100,000 plus acres, use the radio for education, and the parents beat them if they failed. And that can't happen today. A pity. Yeah, absolutely. Also says, I've got some very articulate farmers here in Australia around my age. Yeah, the farther back you go in time, the more articulate they're going to be, because they will have been educated better. I got a better my grandparents got a better education than my parents. My parents got a better education than me, and it just got worse as time gone on. Now they learn nothing. Super Cruise 63 says, you acted as your first daughter's teacher for home-assisted learning, and she had higher test scores than 90% of her peers. And I'm the only high school grad, but I graduated in 1981. Yeah, I am totally in favor of not sending your kid back to school. They're not going to learn anything. They'll do better with you. No matter how smart you think you are, you can still teach them better. No matter what your educational level is, you can still teach them better. Even if you yourself are an illiterate, one of the people that came out in K through 12 within the last 20 years who can't read or write or perform the most basic math, all you need to do to teach your kid is stay one lesson ahead of them. You get a textbook and you go, okay, this is chapter 1. My kid's going to do chapter 1. I will do chapter 1 first. And I will get chapter 1 done and then hand it off to the kid so that when the kid has questions about chapter 1, I will know what to do. Stay one step ahead of them. And not only will they be educated, so will you. One of the things about one-room schoolhouses is, you had different levels of people doing different things. So one of the things that they had older students do would be to help teach and tutor the younger students. So that would reinforce what was going on already, right? So the kid who is, say, 10th grade level was teaching somebody who was in the 4th grade level, helping the teacher teach that person. So anything that was going on at the 4th grade level or maybe above would be reinforced in that student. It would help their learning because they would be helping teach this other person. And, if I was going to do schools today, I would do one of two things. I would either close them all down and go to one-room schoolhouses in neighborhoods and take all of the kids, regardless of their age, 50 of them or so, and put them in a one-room schoolhouse and work it that way. For the exact same reason I talk about. You get a teacher who knows a hell of a lot, and then you have younger students who are being taught or taught or tutored by the older ones. And they all learn better that way. Or, if you're going to keep the buildings open, you hire people to come in who are doing work in a particular field. Like if you want somebody to teach IT, if you want somebody to teach programming, here I am. I can come in for a couple of hours a day, and I'm sure that my boss at that a company I work for, they'd say, yeah, go, because we need this educated workforce. We need people coming out of high school who know what the hell to do. Get people who are auto mechanics to come in and teach, some type of auto repair and shop classes. Get guys who are plumbers to come in and teach stuff like that. Get guys who are accountants to come in and teach certain levels of math. That's how I do it, because you teachers are no good anymore. And I'm sorry if you're a teacher and you're watching me. I'm sorry. You suck. And there's just no way around it. You don't know what you don't know. I'm sure you think you do. I'm sure you're saying, because I've heard this from teachers, oh, it's because of Common Core, there's only certain things we can do, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm telling you, your peer of 100 years ago knew this, and you know this. You're no good anymore. It would be better for every student if a parent taught them, no matter what their educational level is. Just keep one chapter ahead of your kid. You'll learn something, and so will they. But they'll learn it better through you than they will for a teacher. Let's see. Drop 2 says, graduated high school, year 12 in 1981. Yes. I am a class of 1983. I have never gone to any of my reunions. I've never had any interest into it. You walk out of school and you think, God, that girl's hot, And I know that if I went back today, somebody who looked at me and said, that was a weird guy, but, he was okay. And I'd come back today and they'd see this, and it would shatter their illusions. Same thing if I came back and I saw the girls that I thought were really hot in high school, and it would shatter my illusions. I have no interest in doing that. I prefer to keep my memories of that period, which aren't all that good to start with, because I was the geeky guy, so I was the one that was always picked on. But I prefer to keep what little fantasies I had about that time period intact, rather than go out and find out it was totally wrong. Drop 2 says, when you were teaching English in Brazil, you could actually teach the classes without the books know the subject. Yes, I can teach. I learned from teaching. I can teach almost any computer language up through at least the beginner level, some of them intermediate, and occasionally a couple of them that would be at the high end. I can teach French probably all the way through the college level, at least the beginning college. No, I could probably teach it all the way through the college level. Take me a little time to get completely fluent in it again. I'm not. I try to keep my hand in by watching French language stuff on YouTube. But it would take a little while for me to get me to re-become fluent. The thing about becoming fluent in a foreign language is that you start to think in it. And I still do think a little bit in French. There are things that I think in French and English. When you're actually fluent in a language, that means that you have a good chunk of your brain that's constantly thinking in another language. You'd be thinking when I was fluent, I was, half my brain was thinking in French. So when I heard something French, I wasn't translating it. That was just coming in as French, and that was what I was hearing. So that's what being really fluent in a foreign language is. It's taken me a little time to get back to where I'm totally fluent like that. I was at one time. But I could teach French. I could teach, computer networking. I can teach computer hardware. I can teach English composition. I can't diagram sentences. That's something you would, by the way, teachers of today, can you diagram a sentence? Because your forefathers could. They could diagram a sentence. I can't. I learned how to do a good sentence by virtue of reading and then doing a lot of writing. First, Marshall, if you're still watching, I learned to be a good writer when I was doing online writing in the FidoNet Trek Echo long before the internet was popularized. That's where I learned to become a good writer. And I've become better as time goes on. I will tell you, I am working on a little project that may never see the light of day, because the only thing that I've ever done with any regularity is wrote technical manuals. But I have a project because I am so impressed and love the series Star Trek Continues very, very much. And if you want to see my words on that, I did a little send-off for Grant Imahara, who played Sulu on that series. It was my last couple of videos. I've been working on novelizing the final 2 episodes of that series. In point of fact, what I'm trying to novelize is Where No Man Has Gone Before, the very first episode with Kirk and Spock in it, the second pilot for Star Trek. But that leads into To Boldly Go, which is the 2-parter at the end, and is the series finale for Star Trek, the original series, that we never got to see. I am working on novelizing all of those 3 things together. It may never come to fruition. I am not a great writer, but I learned how to write on my own. I didn't learn how to write in school. I mean, I learned some of the basics, but that's all. I never really learned to write in school. I learned to do things like, okay, you got a paper. All right, you don't know how to start it. Spend the first paragraph rephrasing whatever the hell the instruction was. Okay, write a paper about this. All right, first paragraph. I'm going to write about this subject. Last paragraph, do the same thing, and now I have written about this subject. And I taught that to my kids, by the way, and they got A's. But I mean, I never was a great writer because of school. I was a great writer because of the things that I read, the science fiction that I read, and I'm not a great writer of I don't think anyway that I'm a great writer of fiction. I don't think I could write original fiction. I may be able to get this novelization done in a way that makes sense and is good. If it sees the light of day, it'll be free, obviously, because you can't pay charge anything for that. It'll be a free download someplace. It'll be an EPUB. That's what I'm working on. And it may never see the light of day. I may decide that it's just not good enough. I don't know. I may never get to it because it's slow going for me. I have to think about, okay, this is not a technical document you're writing. But all that writing that I've done, I got good at writing and being clear with my writing by virtue of doing stuff at work and being a teacher. Not because of anything that I learned in school. Let's see. Super Cruise 63 says, I was offered an auto shop teaching position at 2 different high schools here. Unfortunately, couldn't afford the pay cut. Yeah, that's the problem. That's why I say you take people who are actually working in this field being paid by someone else, by another company, who says to themselves, yes, we need an educated workforce. We're allowing you to go off for a couple of hours. And you pay them, some kind of stipend, but that's about all. And let them earn money at whatever they're doing otherwise. But there's a one says, Bill, school system has failed. They're teaching children to hate Trump. Why, Bill? Why? Because that's the other thing. Over time, socialism and communism has completely infiltrated all levels of education, K through 12, all the way up through advanced degrees. Socialism and communism, that's all that schools now are. They don't teach reading, writing, anything. They teach communist and socialist indoctrination. They are indoctrination centers, and that is all. And teachers, if you're watching me, I'm sorry, that's what you are. You're a leftist, and you're teaching your children leftist ideals. You learned it in college or through your own K through 12, and now you're teaching it to them. You are indoctrinating them, and that's all you're doing. I challenge you to tell me different. Come on my live stream, and I will have you. You'll be the first person that I have that I will get on Skype. And by the way, if you want to get with me on Skype, kind of too late. It's 11:45. But some night when I haven't done like I did here and gone through all that footage, if you're a teacher, get with me anytime, and I will talk to you and tell you just how ignorant you are and how all you're doing is indoctrination. And that's why they teach them to hate Trump and stuff. They don't teach them about the history of this country. They teach them that the people who founded this country were evil. They don't teach that the whole American experiment is that we have a constitution that says the government can only do certain things and everything else is the people. The people are more important than the government, and that is what they mean by American exceptionalism. We are different from every country because of that, and they don't teach that anymore. What they teach instead is that all that is horrible and that we need communism and socialism. That's what they teach. And so, of course, people come out of there hating Trump because they've been fed all this nonsense. I'm not a Trump supporter, but neither am I. But I'm also not someone who was taught all this stuff, nor am I suffering from Trump derangement syndrome. I can just look at it as a libertarian and go, well, I don't agree with this, but given the current circumstances, I understand why it happened. And I don't have to hate Trump. I can look at what Trump says and go, okay, well, the press is always lying about him. What happened in that clip right before they took something? What happened in that clip right after? What did they do? How did they take it out of context? And damn near every time they do. So, of course, if you're taught this stuff and if you can't read, you're going to rely on whatever the hell the press tells you. And so now we have a population of half of the country of which is actually mentally ill. Trump derangement system is one thing, but when you have this mindset that is totally at odds with observable reality for 4 to 8 years, I have been in lots of therapy from time to time. My parents were psychologists. I have a kid who's working towards a PhD in psychology. I'm not a psychologist, but I do know this from my own experience and what they told me. When you have a mental illness, you have to want to change, or you never will. You have to want to change. Now we have a populace, half of whom actually are mentally ill and will have been so for 8 years, and that gets ingrained. It gets ingrained. It becomes part of your thinking process. You have to want to change it. What happens when Trump is out of office with these people who are mentally ill? Literally mentally ill. What will happen? How will we ever recover from this mental illness? I don't know, because they have to want to change. And why would they? They've been fed this stuff from K through 12 into college from their media. They're mentally ill now, and it's becoming ingrained. They have to want to change. How will they ever want to change? It's a huge problem that I don't think people see coming. They're mentally ill. They really are. And it is becoming a mental illness that is ingrained so long that it's not something they're going to be able to drop out of very easily. They have to want to change. How do you do that with half of the population of the country, maybe more? Let's see. Drop Truth says teachers in the past were underpaid everywhere. Today, many are overpaid. I wouldn't say that. Most of them don't make a lot of money, but hell, they're not worth anything anymore. Drop Truth says every proper sentence must have a verb. Well, most people graduating don't know what a verb is. Blazer 101, what Drop Truth is saying to him, because stupid people only fare well in a socialist communist where everyone is equally stupid. Well, that's stupid. Most of them are not stupid. They're just completely uneducated. They have been indoctrinated. They're not stupid. I never want to say they're stupid. The people that I worked with weren't stupid. They just had never learned anything. They didn't know how to learn things. They didn't have the self-discipline to learn. They didn't know how. Yeah, that's something else you have to have, is a knowledge of how to learn, how to sit down with a book and actually learn something out of it. And if you go through K through 12 without ever cracking a book, you don't know how to learn. But they're not stupid. They're just terribly uneducated. Dropper 2 says, once technology can achieve a 3D printer that is nearly as good as a Star Trek replicator, then the elites can call what they call the useless eaters. No. We are on the cusp, in my lifetime, I am sure, of coming up with a 3D printer that is, because we have them now that'll 3D print cells. The medical grade ones can do that. Sometime in my lifetime yet, within the next 20 years, statistically, that I have left on the planet, we will see replicator technology. And it is one of the things that will change what it means to be human, because it will eliminate hunger. Eliminate it worldwide. It will be cheap and easy to do this, and it will change what it means to be human. There's another set of technologies, quantum computing, computers the size of my fingernail that will do anything. Quantum energy teleportation, which is basically a kind of quantum entanglement, which means we're getting rid of all wires, all radios, everything, anything we use for computer communication, all out the window. It'll revolutionize computing, as will quantum computing, revolutionize it, and change. All of these things will change what it means to be human, because everything that we think about now as a problem will be gone, not just for elites, for everyone. It will change what it means to be human. Drabadu says also, Star Trek replicators create something from nothing. How is that possible? What powers and where will they get the raw materials? Well, that'll be solved one way or the other. One way or the other, it will be solved. Raw materials may be an issue, but only briefly. This is coming down the pike. This is something that will change what it means, fundamentally, what it means to be human. Driver 2 says, let's see, God shall give them over to a reprobate mind. It's happening today. I don't know for sure about, reprobate mind necessarily what you mean, but people have been turned over to communists and socialists. No question about that in terms of our teaching. Driver 2 said, stupid in the Forrest Gump sense of the word, not mentally disabled. No, because Forrest Gump was some level of mentally retarded. I don't know what you would call what he had, but he was some level of mentally retarded. No. I'm just talking about kids who are bright kids who simply were never taught anything and were only taught that communism and socialism is good and that anyone who disagrees with them is evil, and that speech itself is the same thing as violence. That's what they were taught. That's what they were told for 12 to 16 years or more. That's what they were told. They were indoctrinated that way. They're not stupid. They're not capable. It's not like they're incapable of learning something. That's sort of where I draw the line about, okay, not necessarily stupid, but I mean, a mental level where you're capable of learning something or not capable of learning it. And these are people who are capable of learning quite a lot. It's just that that's not, they were never taught how, they were never taught the right things, they were never taught anything useful. They were just taught communism good, anybody who opposes it evil. Drop Truth says, what is their future? I don't know. We're approaching a point where I think we're getting, at least in the U.S., approaching a point where we have something like a civil war. And when that happens, these people who have stuff ingrained in them may become an enemy. I mean, they just may need to be enough of them killed until the rest decide that they're going to have to change. I don't know for sure. I really don't know for sure what happens. I see something like that could happen because you're going to run into people like me and other people who will not allow socialism and communism to take over. We will fight. We will ultimately fight. I don't know when that tipping point happens, but we will ultimately fight. And we will ultimately be forced to kill people, just like the Civil War. I don't know. Sociopaths and drones of a nanny state? I don't think so, because it's financially unfeasible. And in any case, people like me aren't going to go for it. You may notice that I have a new pin here, in addition to the one that I got from Jesse Milestone at Mindless Entertainment when I first started doing this. I also now have a U.S. flag and a Gadsden flag, the Don't Tread on Me flag. I'm going to fight if it comes to that. I'll pull a gun, and if necessary, if you're a communist socialist who is trying to hurt me or mine, I will kill you. It's just going to come to that, I think. I don't see anywhere else for it to go. Moving on to something a little better. Yes, have I seen the Star Trek Lower Decks trailer? Yes, I have. Why am I not surprised somebody like Alex Kurtzman, that absolute talentless hack fraud, would come up with something like that? There was a Star Trek, the original series, animated series in the early, mid-1970s that was awesome in terms of its stories. The animation was very limited by today's standards because of the budget restrictions they were operating under and the fact that they had no CGI. Today, what I really like to see happen is somebody go back, and I know that these things exist somewhere because I have the soundtrack. So I know that the isolated portions of dialogue and the isolated portions of music exist. I would like to see somebody go back and reanimate using modern CGI and making it much more fluid and stuff using the dialogue that is already recorded. And then go back and take music from Star Trek, the original series, and match that up with this animated series and come out with something like that. That would be a great animated series. Something where the stories are good, the actors are what we expect them to be, and, if you could reanimate all of that, that would be awesome. This just looks like cheap laughs, fart jokes, And if I've seen the picture of the ship, the secondary hull is attached. You get the primary hull attached to the engines, which are attached to the secondary hull. Apparently, nobody told them how that works. I would rather not take a job in the secondary hull, having to go through the engines to start with. The things with the big warp coils and all the dangerous stuff. Apparently, nobody told them how this stuff works. Dropper 2 says, Task, Star Trek the Animated Series was great. There's another Star Trek animated series called Prodigy. Yes, that's being touted now. That's also, I've seen a couple of episodes of that. That's not bad. I believe it was Starship Republic that did a fan series that not only did live action episodes, they also did animated ones. And the fun part about that was they made the animation look exactly like it would have if you were making it by Filmation in the 1970s. Not only that, Lou Scheimer was still alive at that time. Now, Lou Scheimer, because of budgetary reasons, would sometimes do voices, not only on Star Trek the Animated Series, but also on all of the stuff that Filmation did, which was a lot of stuff. He would sometimes do voices, and I started to be able to recognize when he was doing voices. They had him do a couple of voices. I thought that was a kick. And then they had not only that, but they also got, blanking on his name now. I shouldn't. My brother in Star Trek. Why am I blanking on his name? Somebody told me. The guy that was running Vic Mignogna. There. They also got Vic, who does a lot of voice work. He did a couple of voices on some of their episodes. It was great. It was freaking great. It was awesome. But yeah, there's some. The fans understand. The fans know Star Trek. The fans know what we want. They don't want fart jokes. That's just stupid. Supercruise63 says, on the bright side, Axonar first episode interlude will be coming out pretty soon. We'll have Real Trek again. I know that I don't care for Alec Peters, but it will be Real Trek. Yeah, I'll watch it. I'm not a fan of Alec Peters. He and I have gotten into arguments over Vic Mignogna before. Neither of us are in a position to be able to know for sure anything about Vic Mignogna. He's been accused and is fighting in court. Accusations of like molesting girls at conventions and stuff like that. I always figure innocent until proven guilty. And when you just talk about somebody, that doesn't tell you anything. His ex-fiancée has said bad things about him, but I never listen to anybody's ex-fiancée, ex-wife, anything, because I know that they lie about stuff all the time. I know they lie about stuff. I know. Trust me, I know. So I don't pay any attention to those. And so the people that he's had, the people that Vic has had that, said they were victims have come out and said, no, Vic just gave me a hug. That was nothing. He wasn't doing anything bad to me. And Alex feels radically differently, but he wasn't there either. So that's where we've gotten into arguments. But I do like his Star Trek. I will certainly watch his Star Trek. I just, he and I disagree about Vic Mignogna. It's just that simple. So listen, I've got about 11:58. That'll give me 3 hours on this one. So I guess that I will probably shut it down for the night. So that is all the time that we have today, boys and girls. So, do a like, sub, hit the notification bell, and do watch again next week and maybe in between if I can get some good videos out. Well, that's all that we have for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
This world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.